Order. Say so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. Good morning, Crawford. Should we start like that and be like, what was it? Robin Williams and Vietnam. Good morning, Crawford County. All right, the agenda, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? Are there any conflicts of interest or objections to the agenda as written? Hearing none, I'll stand approved as written. Madam Auditor, would you do us the honor of reading the minutes from the last meeting?
September 26, 2023, the Board of Supervisors met at 9 a.m. with Ty Rosberg, Chairman presiding. Members present were Schultz, Dozark, Rosberg, Mulbauer, and Hayden. Minutes of the previous meeting were read and approved. On motion, the board recognized claims for public health and approved claims for all other departments. At 10 a.m. as advertised, a motion was made by Mulbauer, seconded by Hayden to open the public hearing regarding budget amendment fiscal year 23-24. Motion passed unanimously. There were no written objections. At 10:01. A motion was made by Dozark, seconded by Schultz to close the hearing. Motion passed unanimously. A motion was made by Schultz, seconded by Dozark to approve the following resolution 2023-32. Appropriations being increased to the following departments. Increases to be funded by service area amendment hearing, September 26, 2023. Voting aye, Schultz, Dozark, Rosberg, Mulbauer, and Hayden. Motion passed unanimously. A motion was made by Hayden, seconded by Mulbauer to approve the following resolution 2023-33, resolution transferring funds in the amount of $7,000 from self-insurance fund 8,500 into the wellness fund 4020. Voting aye, Schultz, Dozark, Rosberg, Mulbauer, and Hayden. Motion passed unanimously. On motion duly seconded, the board adjourned at 11:03 a.m. Agendas for the next meeting are posted and available at the courthouse on Friday, 4:30 p.m. preceding the next meeting.
Okay, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Sounded short.
Sounded shorter than felt. Last week anyway. Hearing none, are there any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll stand approved as read. Thank you, Madam Auditor. I already got my flu vaccine. Share that. Well, that's mine. You don't see that until I put it down.
Yeah, you were sharing his.
I know, share the check,
Yeah,
but.
just share that. Okay, next on the agenda is the supervisor's reports, and if you got any special committee reports, okay. Let's see, Craig, you're first this week.
Briefly, I guess the only thing that I have is with the, being on the 28E with the, city and school on the Children's Imagination Station building, is there's been some discussion as far as replacement of that playground and how to do that, with Head Start. And after I had some information I submitted to Colin, and Colin then got back to everybody, and we decided to luckily form a committee. And I'm gonna serve on that committee to see, and someone from Head Start and Children's Imagination Station, they have their own board other than the 28E board. So we're getting representation from them, the 28E, and then, what's that from Community Action, Danny Segabar, who heads up their Head Start program, is also going to serve. So we'll see, moving forward what that brings. I don't see us meeting, maybe in 30 days, we'll have our first meeting, but you know, the city's building a large playground, one block from there. So hopefully that will be part of our discussion.
I hope so too. This makes the most logical sense, but during my serving on this board, logic and they used all it frequently enough. I guess, and I hope that can work out. Where then beneficial to the taxpayers.
Exactly. When you have two tax asking entities, it doesn't make sense for each to build new a block away from each other.
Yeah.
Good point.
So,
Yeah, it seemed like it has good traction. People are one day.
I mean, Children's Imagination Station has started a fundraising effort towards their playground. I think the committee needs to meet and see what type of playground. There's a nature playgrounds now that are out there that are extremely reduced costs over the traditional historical playgrounds. So I think that needs to be part of the discussion. Maybe it's something totally different than what the city will do, you know, and still meet the requirements. And that's why I really want to have Danny on there from Head Start to make sure we're hitting all the regulations that need to be
I
met.
think, Yellow, still out there, they have that kind of started out there where they have tree trunks that they kind of crawl through and just different things that aren't really supposed to get fun for kids to do. So,
Kind of like what we used to do growing up on the farm.
Yeah,
Just
I know.
stuff to crawl on,
Yeah.
dump off with and stuff.
And they were free.
Yeah.
hang
Yeah,
from
you
a
can't
tree
bring
over a
like
tree.
20 round bales of hay in there, just sitting out there.
You better believe it.
Right.
Kids love crawling.
Oh, yeah.
Tire swing,
Yeah, tire
you
swings.
know. But,
Yeah.
so we'll see. I'll just keep you abreast as we move forward. How it all pans out.
Yep.
That's all I got, Ty.
Mr. Mulbar?
What I had is Ty and I, speaking anytime, Ty had secondary roads contract negotiations last week. I thought it went very well. Stasi, they came in asking for an increase in their food allowance from 200 to 250.
And this is for next year's budget?
Yeah. It'll be for they're under contract
Food
till
allowance.
July or
Food
June
allowance.
30th.
And,
Right, Harry, they should be, yeah,
boot.
24, so that's.
Then they wanted,
27.
8% the first year, 6% the second year, and 3% the third year. Kind of collaborated. We talked back and forth a little bit. We ended up going with $1.20, so the dollar amount rather than a percentage amount, $1.20 raise for 3 years straight, for a 3-year contract. And we did do the $250 allowance, but we changed it from boot to clothing. Our idea there was, say you do spend $300 or $250 on a pair of boots and you don't need a new pair of boots next year, but maybe you do need a pair of bibs or something work-related clothing item that's not offered. Just it's like, and receipts, Paul can request a receipt to make sure that
Okay.
they're spending it on what they're supposed to be spending it on.
Cause the county furnishes the shirts or
The vest
Shirts and coats,
the coats. Okay.
and the vest.
and I think gloves.
No,
No gloves?
at least they did. It was. Sure.
Maybe it was just shirt, coats, boots.
But it gives them some flexibility, some option, you know, why have 10 pairs of boots or buy a new pair every year if you don't need them?
That was the problem. I
But-
mean,
Like you said, they have to be able to provide receipts upon request. In case there was any question that they actually spent it, you know, by anybody,
Going to about
supervisor, Paul, or anybody, they
They
have to
need
be
to
able
be
to
steel
provide.
toed, right?
And that way they
Yeah.
create some,
Fire steel toed.
yeah, wait,
you know,
Is composite qualify?
oversight.
Right.
and as long as it meets the ANSI standards for boots, yeah.
But that's the primary thing is for the boots. There's some guys.
Right, we emphasize, make sure you have good boots. I don't know, Ty, I thought it went well.
No, I didn't.
Good job, guys.
I was glad that we got the dollar amount. You know, for obvious reasons, we've always tried to get that started, you know, I mean, I don't know that has to be something you use every year's dollar amount, but on some years, it really helps to
I think
even out the playing field.
when you start to see that wage gap from the top earners to the bottom, that's the time to implement dollar amounts for.
That was what we thought.
I agree.
So as of we sit now, the contract is being written up in our county attorney's office for
2 years,
3 years.
3 years.
$1.20 for each year for 3 years.
Yeah, that was the other thing. The two big things that we took into account other than immediate issues with inflation or what have you is, you know, through COVID, they worked every day and never ever received any kind of
Yeah.
big compensation, or, you know, you heard about the governor throwing money out to people and everything, you know, which we didn't have a lot of money for that. We wanted to make sure that we used our COVID dollars to look after things that typically don't get, you know, funded. So, I mean, we wanted to be careful with our COVID money, so we didn't hand out quote unquote bonuses or pay raises. But that was one of the things that we wanted to take in account, you know, obviously it's been 3 years ago, but it's still, this is our first renegotiation with them since. So we wanted to take that into account, and I felt we did. And, we also wanted to take into account that they wanted a 3-year one, so it creates a little stability for our budgeting as well. So, I mean,
Is that typical for year?
well, for them, it seems to have been. Is that what, Cal, in your experience of
I
what?
think they've always, I don't, as long as I remember, it seemed like it's always been a 3-year contract. Might have been 1 year we did a year deal, but I think it's always been 3-year.
Well, I think
There's
there's some
They
stability
wanna know
too.
where they're gonna be at.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it was.
okay.
So once Colin or Martha get the contract written up, then it'll go to them to sign and it'll come to us to.
Yeah, they did that all out with no ties to the bargaining unit. They just came in good faith and
Yes, they did.
so.
And they bargained on their own.
No
And-
attorney fees, no nothing. Sit down and let's just discuss our wages and contract.
Like
What does that
responsible
come
adult.
to with the first year as far as a percent, we use that $1.20, you know?
On some of them, it actually, like the bottom guys, it's probably close to a 4 or maybe even a little over, depending on their base. But then as you graduate up, you know, it can get down to where it's a 3, or I don't think anybody, with the $1.20, I don't think anybody was less than 3. I mean,
Because I mean, that as a percentage basis, that will drop every year over the 3 years since it stays the same.
Right.
but that was how we justified doing the 20 instead of $1, because we actually shot $1 at them. And that was how we justified it between ourselves, is that we're not gonna have that, okay, if we give you a 4 this year, you know, that gets added on. Which makes it, you know, by the end of the time you get to that 3 years, you've really added a lot. Where this is a consistent, you know, I mean, it's consistent to work our budget, yet it still gives them a good pay raise each year. At least
Especially at the bottom end.
yeah, especially your guys that are the lower wage earners. I mean, you gave them something that's, you know, that, I mean, even when we had the staff in here, they were talking about the lower wage earners were living paycheck to paycheck and didn't have fancy toys and all that, you know, so I mean, we were really concerned with that, especially on the out staff where there's more of them that have the, you know, the bottom wages, you know, because there's a lot of younger, newer guys on staff, so they aren't gonna have the time and service type add-ons to their salary. So we just thought that was a fair way to go. And we put a lot of thought into it, or at least quickly, but we put a fair amount. Actually, negotiations went rather quick.
And I think, Jared walked away,
Yeah,
happy with what we had worked out and.
I don't
The
know.
only one that came, or did they have?
Yeah,
another?
because,
yeah, Adam had a hospital, something.
yeah, he had something pop up, so it's.
All right,
So there was, not him necessarily personally.
right.
He had something that he had to go visit, but, the next day at their safety training meeting, I had several of them come up to me and say, hey, thanks, we think you were real fair to us, and
I was gonna ask you that.
yeah, so I mean, I had several come up that were happy with how it turned out.
And how many,
And I stopped my brother the other day and said, hey, what's the general consensus? I mean, are they?
What's
pretty
How many
content?
is it?
Oh, it's there.
40.
No,
That's good.
It's great.
it's, probably
Or
30,
he said they thought they.
the total employees he has how many?
like 30 maybe,
And then how many does this bargaining affect?
30.
30?
That's the 30 that is, yeah,
Okay, so just wanted to remind myself about that.
it's roughly in there. I think when I started there, it was like 40 and then it got down to like 27. And then it got back and everybody said he's 3 short. So
I think I counted 32 guys there at the safety meeting.
some of them are
Some of them
probably,
are tired.
Part-timers.
some of them are
Several.
roadside.
Right.
Some of those are roadside, which not covered under that.
So-
Okay, so like.
Yeah, that
Burgess.
was like,
Yeah.
Dave and Furnace. Who else is on roadside?
Chicken man, chop chop.
Chop Chop. There you go. So and they all 3 were there. So when you count them, right, that actually counted 29.
I went to high school with them,
That's
graduated.
chicken man.
We just,
And choppers for Dean.
okay, all right, I'm still gonna.
Sounds like a mafia.
No, it kind of is.
Do they know that's their nicknames?
Yeah.
Okay.
All in all, I thought it was a
Oh, good, thanks, guys.
good deal and we got it done and we'll be set for 3 years. And like I said, when Colin and Martha get it written up, we'll get it on the agenda and
Signed.
signed.
Job.
I do question the part of legality on that, though, if they have no bargaining unit, are they even
Yep,
able?
they have to vote. They're gonna be voting for to keep their bargaining unit fair.
They'll have to keep it, right? And they, but they could still come up here without an attorney.
Yeah.
Representing them.
That was what
Right.
we asked that question. We
Okay.
were told they could.
All right. That's fine. I just didn't realize.
And they
that.
still have to take the contract back and vote on it
Yeah,
themselves.
they have to vote on it as a group.
But it's just like us here, you know, they sent their representative to negotiate in good faith.
Yeah, and he said, I've got autonomy to vote. He said, and he bargained hard. I mean, he didn't just, okay, I mean, he was bargaining. We did a little back and forth,
Yes, we did.
you know, so I mean, but and that's why I think we came to where we did. I mean, because I think it really, you know, I mean, I feel like we gave up a little bit more than I planned to. I feel you probably think the same. And, I think that he feels the same way, so I think that how a negotiation, everybody's supposed to feel when they're done, at least what I keep being
Right.
told, I don't know.
Right,
But-
if you both feel the same.
Yeah, if you both feel like, oh, we left something on the table there, yeah.
And that's good.
But, you know, I think all in all, I think that we were happy and they were happy.
Yep.
Anything else, Mister?
If they fail, I believe it's silly. I mean, they paid nothing and they don't pay dues.
No union dues, nothing goes out, so it's all their
Why
check,
wouldn't they vote to stay part of it?
yeah.
But sometimes,
Without it, they'd just go back to an hourly rate at our mercy,
Yeah,
which, I mean, not saying that at our mercy, but they wouldn't have no bargaining power.
yeah,
I feel like what can happen to you sometimes, that you bring in a lawyer as a representative, and we bring in a lawyer, and then they nitpick harder at it, and ends up, everybody walks away just upset.
yeah. Even if you both got a good deal, or one,
Right,
even the one that gets a better deal.
you're kinda
Oh, annoyed.
picking at, we can get more, and another lawyer, we can get less, and it, you draw it out for weeks or months, or even we've had, you know, mediation, and where we just sat down and had just a candid conversation, here's where we're at, here's where you're at, let's meet in the middle.
Well, we started that when I was on the school board when Bill Wright was superintendent. I forgot the word that he used, but it used to always be an arbitrator would come in and sit down with both parties. And then we started negotiating just with Bill Wright and a member of the school board and the union head, and they brought a representative. And we always did 2-year increases as far as salary was concerned. So every other year, all we're talking about is language, you know, the money's off the table because we already agreed on that a year ago. And it just started a process that was just much more palatable for everybody, where I certainly don't want to say you looked forward to it, but it was something that you knew it wasn't a huge concern as far as negotiations every year, because previously it was always adversarial.
Wasn't the drama you see on TV.
Not that you guys haven't had any drama in this courtroom or at this courthouse with some union negotiations recently.
Yeah. I don't know, you know, I mean, I think they come out pretty good. If you sit there and you go in and sit down and talk like adults, I think that generally, I mean, everybody you talk to on that, they understand the responsibilities and the constraints that we operate under, and we understand how hard they work for us, you know, I mean, there was a day when you could walk into the county sheds in Crawford County and there was pretty good euchre games going on. And these guys are out working all the time. I mean, they're out doing their due diligence, you know, and that's gotta be worth something. I mean, you do good work for the county should appreciate that. And our roads, are they perfect? Well, within the weather confines that they have to deal with, I think they do a hell of a job, you know, and compared to other counties in the state of Iowa, and I will tell you, after being in NACO this year, I would say in the nation, we are probably I'll bet we're in the top 10% on our network as far as bridge repair and what we're doing to upgrade within the confines. If you would take the dollars that we earn, you know, or that we have, I should say, for road work and the staff that we have, I think that we probably do is in the 10% of the nation. I really do. I mean, just by what you'd listen to people talk about at a meeting like that. So I don't know.
And they're taxpayers too. They understand.
Yeah, exactly. Very good
Where we're
point.
coming from.
Yeah, a lot of them have farms or properties or other businesses themselves, you know, their wife might have a business or husband or. Anyway, Jean, would you like to take an opportunity there?
So we are going to start painting today.
Excellent.
Holy
Two
shit.
colors that they.
Funky painter clothes that you're wearing?
I'm just gonna hold the ladder, you guys.
Okay.
Come on. All right. So they wanted to know if there was gonna be water up there for them to like wash up with and stuff. We don't have water there, correct? We can't turn it on.
No,
But yeah,
after the
I have no
water,
idea.
after the water,
I don't know that.
I don't think we turned it back on.
I said I
don't
didn't
know.
think we did, so
I
they're,
don't
I
think we
told them
turned it
just
on
bring
yet.
their water with them, and I'm going to give them the key so that they can store their ladders and things, in the downstairs, so they're not dragging it back and forth. It's a lady that's doing it,
Sure.
and, she is borrowing a pickup to kind of get things going, and so, yes,
So previously, when you mentioned painting, the bid was just for the outside.
just for the out
But you
scraping.
said these people are painting inside or they're just
No,
gonna store their
They're
stuff?
gonna store their
I got
pails of water, their ladders, their brushes and things
Gotcha.
inside
Well,
down
we
the
don't want it.
basement.
we don't want to turn the water on. Sorry to interrupt, but we probably don't want to turn the water on and we gotta fix that pipe. that runs
Right,
across.
yes, that's what I told them, that there was not water, but I just wanted to verify
Right,
that that
yeah,
is.
I'm pretty sure that is
They will
true.
be using our electricity for the outside for their telehandler and for some
Oh,
things, so.
okay.
But these are I kind of had Kim have the girls kind of vote, and she tallied up, you know, how many people voted for. So they're gonna be very similar in color, but just a little bit of an dated color. And so then they've also picked out the scheme that they're gonna have inside. All the offices have to fall within the three colors that they pick, so everything kind of flows a little bit. So that'll start today. I have 2 bids unsealed for the doors and windows. I did call Frazier's last week and told them we were gonna allow them another week to get their vendors, and they thanked us and said that that would work. And then this is from, the glass company over in Carroll. And so,
Zero class.
When do we open them?
well, the public health board, we have to post
Oh,
a
the
meeting.
board does that?
We'll do that.
That's right. Good point.
Hopefully this week someday, because it would be great to, do the concrete, know where your door and your scoop and everything's gonna go, but we'll see what we've got inside these.
Yeah, like Carol Glass or?
Carol glass. Any glass. So, that's
Oh.
going forward.
2 of them.
So, and, yeah,
Is
Meeker
that
is going.
deadline over for the bidding? Deadline
Yep,
is
yes,
couple-
yep, we gave them another week and they were all in here, plenty of time, so we'll get the other board together, we'll just do a Zoom meeting and, I'll go to the board, whoever can come, but we'll Zoom with the other people, it'll take 5 minutes of their time. Get that going, the painter is going to coordinate with the concrete people so that she can get that side done without having to interfere with their concrete. So I suggested she just call Frazier, find out when they're gonna do the concrete. So I suggested she start with that side, especially since that's the one that she's gonna need the telehandler for and the highest peaks. Get that done out of their way and then continue on with the other one. So hopefully we'll see some progress. She's gonna scrape it all. She's gonna repair the window frames that are in the front. They're kind of deteriorating, but she has a way to make those look pretty. So I have great faith in her. This gal, if you ever went to a play at the Schleswig School back in the days when they had all of the backdrops that were painted. Everybody had gone to one of those. They were fabulous. She was the person that did all of that artwork. She's kind of artsy and kind of handy and has done a lot of different work. So we'll see how it goes, but she's gonna stop by today to pick these up because I tried to get them on Friday for her and then either Lynn or Kim were in the office, or could Kim tell them where she had put this, so I couldn't get it until yesterday, so slowed her down just a little bit. But that's that. We did have the Buena Vista's Crawford County SAC Early Child Care meeting with Annette. And I did not bring the whole budget with me, I grabbed the wrong packet, but they figure they're gonna be about $48,000 shorts for funding all of their projects. So a gal from Elder Bridge was on and she was talking about how they're gonna be shorting a lot of their programs also. And they're suggesting bake sales and sell popcorn and sell, things. And so they needed a volunteer from every county to spearhead these fundraisers. And Mike nominated me. I thanked him a lot. So we'll be getting together to kind of see what we could do. So be ready to buy popcorn and cookies and pie and brains from me to find all this stuff. So for your checkbook.
Is that because the state cut their budget back?
State, and it has to do with the way HHS is distributing the money in just certain programs that it should.
So I've
So,
been advertising on this little radio this time of year. The combine tractor. How much money the state is sitting on? Billions of dollars, and they're cutting
the ice
programs
melt.
for the aged and elderly,
Yep, yeah.
making them go do fundraisers
And children.
and children.
And children.
And the thing that
Incredible.
about early childhood Iowa and what you said on, to me, it was always a board where I appreciate that you gotta see the funds go directly to work. You
Yeah.
gotta see
Yeah.
them go to Eye Smiles and
Yeah.
Nurse Care Consultings and all the things that they provide that directly affect people's lives.
And how many children that would not, the education that they give to the mothers, the young mothers, and maybe, mothers who just didn't have a good role model teaching their, how to do the right thing. Getting kids in with dental, programs early to find. The other day I was at a ball game and I saw this child with a sucker and a Mountain Dew. And it took everything I had not to go and take it away from the child. Who gives their she could barely walk and she had a sucker and a Mountain Dew. And I hope that education, that they can give that education, that is just those first teeth that you have is the pattern for what is gonna be when you get older. And the sooner they start with all that, if you cut those programs to where, the dentists don't wanna take them anymore because they lose too much money on it and but the education is worth everything that we
So-
have.
I gotta ask,
Sure.
selling popcorn, if sell a lot of popcorn to get up to 48,000, you have started to have conversations of what programs.
We have not. We're also looking at donors, just maybe people, and I just noticed the other day that, KR Buck is helping with you guys' playground equipment. I took some cans down to the cat place and there's a plaque on there that says this was donated by KR and Carla Buck. So there's people out there that are willing, if they know, and that's part of what the Elder Bridge lady had mentioned. If people know the need is out there, they're looking for things that would be a feel-good program to give to. And so part of it's getting the word out there. Part of it is,
I can help. Happy Cats is a 501c3 organization, so.
Right, right. Yeah.
You get a tax deduction
Mhm.
for
but it's,
giving or donating stuff to them.
so it's 3 different counties. So each county, Buena Vista would have a fundraiser, Sac would have a fundraiser, Crawford. For each of us to possibly come up with $12,000, maybe isn't as big of a stretch as you might think. But we'll have a meeting to discuss and kind of put our heads together, see what we can do, see if we have any people out there that,
They cut you 48,000, but Rolling Hills can pay 45,000 for landscaping.
why do you always want to get me going? Why do you just know what button to push with me? But Annette was frustrated because they had done this questionnaire for her to finish. And she put her thoughts all out there and she never really got any feedback on having taken this assessment and just felt like nobody really listened to her.
But that'll even trickle down to our public health, got our public health contracts with ECI on certain programs as well, correct?
Yes,
So that'll be a shortfall in the public health revenue,
it will. But
which then turn around and wait till budgeting time will be a larger tax asking because we have shorted funds in that revenue right?
we'll have to reevaluate all of it. And that was just kind of a preliminary. And if you know Annette, there's a lot of, she's always moving stuff around. But that was just kind of my take away without having all of my notes. Is what stuck out that I'm now on a fundraising committee. Just like, but we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Mike, right?
Yeah, thanks. I did tell Mike, thank you very much. Really, I'll get back somehow. So, but those meetings are always, the providers, they really are out there working. They really have a big, because they have such a large area to take their, they make their areas larger and cut back their funding and it just, I don't know. We're working on it though. So I'll keep you in tune.
Are we still funding, Sarah at home in the schools for, I thought we were funding, wasn't it Sarah? Through Great Plains to go into the schools for,
I don't, is the name still
is it
Sarah?
Sarah or is it somebody else? But are we still putting somebody in the schools for?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Mental services.
Well, that's not these people here.
But I thought ECI helped pay for, someone through Great Plains.
Taught me on that one. I know we do still have Jill that's out
It
there.
might have changed too. But
Yeah, but, and I don't know exactly, this is just an overview picture of, and that's first attempt at where she thinks that's the big number, where she thinks she's gonna be short. So
It's gonna be hard to decide where to cut from because they're all good programs.
that's right, that's right. So that's where it's gonna come in, if we can bring in some extra stuff, and then there won't be that much of a decision, so. That was just my takeaway from that Zoom meeting. And once again, they're long meetings, they're, you know, you sit there, just looking at your watch, I gotta go. That was the day I needed to go out to, the road department, and I just kept saying I have another meeting, and, but you hate to go before it's over, you know, so I kind of, was walking around with my computer in my hand. So anyways, but that's my update on that. Otherwise, week was pretty good.
Is that all you have?
This,
Okay. I only left me 15 minutes to fill.
you can do it, Ty, you can do it.
Kind of.
Oh, Kyle, sorry, Kyle. Didn't mean to leave you out.
That's all right.
At least didn't call Kevin.
Mine won't take, shouldn't take real long, but there's a conservation board meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. I don't know about 10 via teleconference or in the combine, or it's supposed to rain, so good chance to get there. I know they'll probably ask about upgrades to Nelson's Park, and I'm just gonna say, come up with a multi-year plan to start that project. Nervous about our budget, how that's all gonna play out moving forward. But I do think need to find a spot in there for some upgrade down there.
I did pass that on to the Dow City people that had called me that we're gonna start doing that, so.
Well, yeah, it's nice to be able to do all these things, but which kind of segues right into my next part. There's this comm center meeting scheduled for this 1 o'clock today, and I'm not gonna make it, but I have some concerns moving forward, because right now it costs us $0.
Yep.
We got a $1.6 million bill coming from Raycom.
Yep.
Till we get that project up and paid for. Kind of nervous about jumping in bed with something that we don't know how, a year from now, or, I mean, I hope they got the right police chief in there. No, it's just, I'm not trying to say that, but it's not had a good run here of late,
Well, they've been working to try to find the right one.
you know,
Were they proposing something at the comm center?
yeah.
Give them a little bit of a brief.
Yeah, probably a year and a half ago, already started talking with having, and it's kind of always been my goal to have a voice in the comm center, because really right now it's all dictated by the police chief in the city of Denison for the whole county, because that's the way that arrangement was set up back in the 70s, whenever that we would provide the building, they would provide the staffing. So in a nutshell, I mean, there's some agreements in place, but who pays for what, but I think through them conversations, we started having these meetings about how that would restructure and reorganize to where there'd be another committee that would oversee the operation, a board that would oversee the communication center, and we would pay in, the city of Denison would pay in to make that happen. And we were figuring that time $600,000 operating cost total. And I think we're gonna be like 140,000 is what our take that was gonna be. Like I said, right now it costs us $0 to operate that. And Raycom's was about 600,000 more, well, 400,000 more than what I kind of had in the back of my head was gonna be for the final. I was thinking 1,200,000 but 1,600,000, but.
Yeah, I seen that.
So, I mean, we got 900, we're short of 1,000,000 and that we have kind of earmarked for it, but we still gotta come up with 600,000. That's a big number.
700,
The big number.
close to 700.
That's a big number.
That's a large number.
So,
Are they gonna change what they contribute to the building then? If we're gonna change what we contribute to the comm center? Just saying.
well, that's a good point.
Mhm.
Good point. I don't think that's ever been discussed. I
You
don't,
know, and that's just it. Since when we first started, you probably remember the discussions of the police station, the Denison Police actually moving out of the courthouse.
that's
What
kind of when that stuff all started.
stuff all started. And we know you're in farm season, you're stressed and tired.
That's right. That's right. That's when that conversation started, when they were talking about moving out.
Right.
I remember that.
So that was the thing is, we were gaining
You
a,
already know that answer.
I know, so why?
yeah, well, that's just it, is now that he's wanting to stay in here and still operate that way. I think that it would still be advisable to have some type of a board that, you know, he's still gonna have a voice on that board. But that way, nobody's voice gets left out in the county on the comm center's operations. I mean, it ain't telling him that, you know, this is, you know, basically, you gotta have the fire service right now has no voice. The hospital really has very limited or no voice. I shouldn't say no. I'm sure that, you know, Chief Trejo has probably got an open mind. But we had a police chief at one time that didn't have an open mind to these other agencies. Well, so you gotta set up a board or something to protect that voice. Don't you agree, Cal?
I agree. I'm not against the
board.
board. I'm scared about funding.
Well, and if we're paying for everything, then I don't even want the board.
Well,
We just.
what
decide.
other county funds are contributed to the comm center?
Yeah.
Well, there's
Not
911.
necessarily property tax dollars,
But 911.
911 funds get channeled through equipment
right,
that operates that.
right.
Sheriff Department tax dollar funds come backdoor into equipment for that thing.
Right,
So, I
so
mean,
just make sure, make sure they're
Probably already
considering the whole picture and not just,
I think we've been trying to do a good job of that.
oh, I'm sure you
We
have.
meet resistance from
Everybody.
the sheriff's department, has been the biggest proponent.
Well, otherwise, that's why I counted everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
resistance is just their opinion.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
when
Correct.
our own
Their
side gives us a
opinion.
lot of grief, I mean, that,
What's their objection? Just an example
Well-
of an objection.
Quote me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
current sheriff don't want anything to do with it.
yeah.
I want nothing to do with it.
Leave it the way it is.
He just doesn't want to have another responsive, I shouldn't say it like that,
One
but
that's
he doesn't
running,
want another thing added to his soup. You know what I mean?
the one sheriff candidate that's running, I think, has some interest in being a part of it. So, how knows how that's all gonna play out? So maybe we need to hold off to the elections over. Because we have, I don't know, but I don't know.
Well, it's a great point. I mean, it's, when we originally started talking about that, before they even contacted us, I mean, this was something that firemen, I'm sure they were reaching out to you, but I had firemen even reaching out to me before I was even on this board. And said, if you get on there, we need a better setup at the comm center,
Right.
because, I mean, just the organization of the comm center, it was, in some of the counties, and I mean, and I'm not just talking about, you know, local ones to me, I heard it from other departments across the county, that whether it was for their EMS or their fire service callouts, it just wasn't running smooth. And, you know, they didn't get alerted right away when they thought they should all the time, and it made things pretty darn difficult for them to do. So, I mean, we've been talking about this even before I talked to Kyle, since I knew he was fire, I'll get to you in a second. But I mean, Kyle was, you know, I'd reached out to him, is that something we need to work on? And
Some checks and balances, but
exactly. And yeah, well, then they contacted us and, anyway, they contacted us and wanted to start talking about doing something different there. And I thought, well, gosh, that was nice and convenient. We'd already been discussing what we thought would that needed to be done. And, thing is you don't wanna push anybody out of the equation because it affects everybody. I mean, Denison PD, they, not only do they use up most of the confinement facility, they probably have a lot of the calls that come through the comm center, but that doesn't need to minimize the fact that, I mean, EMS is probably our main calls.
Hospital EMS is the number one.
Yeah,
And then I guess Denison
Denison
PD and the
PD.
sheriff's department and then fire,
yeah.
kind of that order.
Kind of in that order. So you can see that, I mean, you want to make sure that there's equal voice across the board, but I mean,
The hospital is willing to help them.
yeah, and the hospital was even willing to get in and play a role financially in this. So I mean, I was very happy to have, hear them wanting to stand up to be, they had issues when we changed over that they wanted addressed. And now they want to be part of it. But that's the thing is you can't fix things if you're not part of the equation. That's what I kind of talked to people up there in the hospital about. So I mean, that was why they thought it was a good idea to be part of that discussion and part of the solution. So, yeah, at 1:00 today, we got that. Jean, did you have something?
Just gonna ask a question.
Okay, please do.
I always felt that one of the problems at the comp center was the training. I had heard that when that new program was implemented, there were some cards that were supposed to be used for the calls, and that the training never got implemented, that we had to change in the management. And so,
Part of that lies back to who's control of it too, because the run cards
ring cards.
from the Denison Fire District, they all got implemented and put in. Now, the outlying towns, no voice in there. They were on the back burner. And at the last minute, they just kind of got hodgepodge in there. So that's part of the,
Front.
so
I remember
those are the
that.
things we're gonna,
I remember
the
that now.
way we could get a voice in there, that's gonna cost us money. And I'm not against I just don't know how our budget's going up moving forward. Yeah, 'cause-
Go ahead, Dave.
I feel like I totally agree with having the voice being heard and the board being set up for all those reasons. I do feel like to see a shift in more burden on the property tax. But if we kick in hypothetically 300,000 or more, if the hospital kicks in, whatever their portion is, what are they gonna do? They're gonna raise their levy rate to cover that cost. Where does that come from? Our property taxes. Where's it gonna come from us? So it's kind of a shift from the city to the deal we have worked out now, but then covering that comp center cost to more property tax cost.
Yep.
And that's what I'm against. Unless it's a fair deal, like Terry had pointed out, where they start kicking back in, portion for the building.
For the bill.
Yeah.
And that is a good point that actually we even discussed. I remember we talked about like because of the jail, they use so much more of the jail in Denison as a whole. Maybe that needs to be part of this discussion too. And well, that was basically met with some resistance before we even got it into the discussion, but
So I'm just gonna ask, who are you meeting with? If there's not a comp board, who do you meet with today?
well,
At 1:00, who's gonna be there?
fire chief, police chief will send a rep because he's out of town. We already got that in an email. And then obviously Kyle or I have been doing it, but I'll show up today and EMA, Sheriff's Department.
Maybe a representative of the hospital.
Yeah.
Just an ad hoc committee to trying to come up with a plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing real formal, it's just got a good representative or two from each of the concerned parties.
Gotcha.
At this time, do you have voting authority or is it just a?
If we have this board, we will.
Right now, let's just take it back.
The board, I should say. And,
The
all
last, before Paul gets in here,
right, go
I
ahead.
mean, appreciate you going with all of that, but we'll do that today.
Yeah.
Get discussion, a lot more discussion probably to be had.
Oh, yeah.
The county farm fell apart. Yeah, we couldn't come to terms with current tenant, so no CRP sign up was done. So we're open for options of renting it again. That we have times on our side, we really don't have to rush into anything.
Correct.
Come up with a plan on how we're gonna rent it, who, because at one time the beginning farmer deal was talked about. Just things to think about. There's still an option, I don't know, with the government. Still potentially could get it into CRP after March 1st. So I wanna kind of find out where the new farm program's gonna be before we go jumping into renting it again. And if we do rent it, it's gonna be smart, having maybe a 1-year contract with some language in it that gives us the right to put it into CRP. Cause and Jerry Bruce, current tenant, is not wrong with saying he's got every right to that farm till the 1st of March, and without him signing off on it, we couldn't do anything, and he wasn't willing to sign. So,
Can I just ask, what that reason would be, or is it just something with no reason?
what he told me is he's got a lot of invested into that property, and he wanted some back to recoup his investment. And what we discussed last week wasn't,
They're taking the bales and stuff.
no, that wasn't even, he wanted some monetary value, which was attached to,
So like
The
putting
CRP.
cows on stocks or something?
no, he wanted the CRP money. I said,
Money.
well, no, instead of going to the fair board. And he signed off on it.
I got
I
you.
said, no, that's not the intent, what we had, so,
Okay, all right.
so we'll just let it go.
Just a
Gotcha.
little curious on.
Okay, well, it makes sense.
Since
That's
he's
good.
on there till the 1st of March, we just need to get past that date.
Yep.
Next year.
And that's
Moving
business.
forward,
I
we
don't
just
blame
gotta-
you.
But if we're gonna have to, if we do decide to rent it out for a year, we sometime would have to decide to have a rent auction before
Correct.
spring. I mean, guys need to have time to,
I want to talk with Martha and see what our legal deals are to rent that. Do we have to, what, can we do a sealed bid? Can we do a beginning farmer deal through somehow and
I don't mind the
put
beginning.
an application in, have some people submit an application to
Jen,
rent
or
it?
you think you're coming?
That's, that's all I have. I wanted to get that out.
Okay. All
Absolutely.
right, thank you.
Well, thanks for putting in the time on it.
Look at what
Yeah.
worked better, but other people. Where you go?
Yep.
Sometimes the best thing is.
For sure.
Pseudo member. Take a
Yeah,
while.
you are. You do a lot of fundraising for us, so.
Morning. Mr. Osmond, please. Floor is yours.
Yeah. A couple of utility permits. This is one that you'll need to sign. There's, should be 3 copies there for you, Ty. It's a water service line. I think some people are having problems with water.
Oh, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
It is an issue.
Bad.
Right now, so it's a hookup basically there to rural water, so.
Which,
Ooh.
the more of them you hook up, the more tasks on rural
Yeah,
water.
on the rest.
I mean, is there south of town, that little housing addition, is that the one, is that?
No, this is
not
just a
those.
residence.
Are they,
It's not one of
are
ours.
they out of the water or are they?
Uh-huh.
I've heard, I don't know.
They are.
But yeah,
I've heard people are hauling water.
it's a problem. Yeah, we need rain.
Oh,
Big part of rain we can get. So, the other one's just a electric line and crossing the street.
Rain and snow.
We'll probably take it either way, I think. I think most people would. And we've had last 3 years, just dry weather, and the last 5 winters haven't been bad at all
I've seen a thing report that the 2025 will be our worst year yet.
for drought. Yeah.
That's
It's dry.
What is it, 89-year Gleisberg cycle or whatever they're.
Yeah, there you go. That's, I was looking to do it on the farm report.
It could be worse. Dust Bowl was pretty bad. Those people.
Just enough to
Long time.
Well, I would equate us not being adjustable to our current farming practices.
Yeah.
We plowed everything.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell exactly where we did
Yeah,
during tillage in the top parts this year.
yeah.
Where we tilled
Write it out.
everything.
Yeah, yeah. The bridge project, the pier wall was successfully poured last Wednesday. And so stripping forms, go over there here today and kind of see what, the end result was. It took them a long time to do it. It took their time because the slower you go up, you gotta go fast enough to make sure you don't have cold joints, but the concrete at the bottom starts to kind of consolidate, which gives you some strength other than just holding the fluid.
Yep.
The forms are basically containing the fluid until it sets and then it becomes a solid. So it worked out.
There's probably a lot of steel in that too, like that
Oh,
deck.
tremendous amount of steel.
Yeah.
That bridge isn't going anywhere. That's gonna hold up.
That's good. That's what we're after.
So now we're so I talked to Dan Graves, the contractor, yesterday morning, and I said, okay, where are we at? The people have been very, very patient, over there. We've had, inquiries, just explain to them, the situation. And so, next week or later this week, we're gonna pour the concrete rail tomorrow, breaking beams to make sure that everything's okay strength wise, but should be doing that tomorrow, later this week, then hauling the dirt from the south side to the north side, getting that over, getting that south approach out. Like Dan said, the biggest thing, and this has always been my concern, is getting the contractor there, the subcontractor who's doing the approach slabs in there in a timely manner. And I made it very clear to Dan, this bridge needs to be open. That needs to be a high priority for you.
Yeah.
And he said it is. We continue to charge days like we would normally do. At the end of the day, that's gonna come here. We're gonna collectively make a decision how, there's the liquidated damages at this point are substantial. Okay, because of the time that it's gone on and we haven't had any bad days, so we'll have to kind of decide where we want to land with that and go from there. They've been great to work with, continue to try to, get this thing moved along and we'll see where we land. So goal right now is to get the bridge open, get people using it.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
As quickly, that's our top priority. We'll worry about the others. We'll sit down and we'll get together in a room and we'll hash it out when we're all said and done. But right now, the focus is getting it done. The shop, I talked to him, kind of just reach out to him about every couple of weeks, 2 weeks. Start in a couple of weeks. So, but they're not here yet.
2 weeks, 2 weeks.
But, I want to get the concrete in before the weather gets bad. We still got some time, but it is gonna change. It's gonna change. I'd
Are
like
you
to get the
nervous about
concrete
it?
in.
I mean, is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can do, but it's, let's get it started.
Mid-November.
But at the end of the day, I don't really have I can't force them to do anything. We got July 1st of next year as the completion date, which we did intentionally, so that we got competitive bids, and that helped us out on that end, so we just have to be patient. We have a shop to still work out of, so we'll get there. Yeah, just have to be patient. Great crew continues to kind of, the weather's been another dry year, good year, so they continue to kind of walk through some of these grading projects. Finishing up on Mill Ridge, got some rock checks to put in the ditches. That'll be done here probably today, and then they're gonna go to 300th Street, kind of work down that southeast corner down here, south of southeast Edison, finish the year up. Bridge crew, just working on some miscellaneous patching, over repair type stuff, and then they're gonna move into that R Avenue Bridge down there where Ed used to be down in that area, and they get that bridge knocked out yet this fall, and that'll probably be the last one. That'll take us into November sometime, and just getting ready for next year's projects. We have a full slate of bridge stuff, and a little light on the grading right now. See what happens. We get more signed up, or otherwise we just, we're gonna have some openings. I know we're gonna have some people retiring. We're probably not gonna fill some of those positions, continue to kind of realign and do things differently.
Sure appreciate you doing that now.
Well, you don't want to have a whole staff of people that have them only work 4 days a week.
Right.
You want to take care of the people you have.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy, is that, we're just gonna have to manage because things are gonna be different.
Do you think
We're gonna just see everything's costing more, and there's just no way unless we continue to see revenues, go up. And, we've had the good fortune, okay, of doing some very significant improvements to our system. Okay, there's a difference between maintenance and improvements. We've done some fairly significant improvements to the system. and hopefully continue to do some of that, but you know, that's what's gonna happen is you're gonna go from improving, making your system better to just kind of keeping your system at status quo.
Should we have a sit down? You know, I mean, in the near future where we discuss some ways to alter our objectives, you know, like we've talked about, maybe road improvement type thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we really, I'm back to the patience thing, but I mean, we haven't got to see how this road's really panned out down here by Hastings and to see if that's something that we'd like to actually take on our own. I mean, do you think that there's some time that we should sit down in the near future and lay out a plan for where we want to go next?
This is part of strategic planning. We kind of did that, you
Yeah.
know, and we can do it again. I don't have
But I
any
mean-
problem with it, but you know, we talk about our assets that we have to manage, you know, primarily as our people.
Yeah.
You know, it's an asset,
Oh, yeah.
huge asset.
Best asset, most
Yeah,
important
and,
asset.
you know, so you have your people, and that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to, you know, say, okay, if we're gonna manage through attrition. We're not gonna hopefully not have to have layoffs or, you know, reduce work hours. We manage through attrition, and then we just figure out what we can do with the people that we have. Now, the one thing we have to be a little careful of is snow removal, making sure that we've got plenty of people in place for snow removal, but there are some part-time people that we could bring in and manage those peaks as well. And we've been managing that by bringing in part-time, you know. We got core staff normally of 37, we're down to, you know, 2 short right now, we'll probably be 3 short here soon. And then bringing in a slate of part-time people throughout the summer months. You know, it's a very economical way to manage and do
That
things,
is.
you know, that we need to do. And so you start looking at those types of things. And, you know, so you manage the people, the equipment just got terribly expensive.
Yeah.
Okay. And then all your facilities that we're taking care of. You know, we have the facilities, buildings, grounds, and then just roads, pavements, gravel roads, and level B roads. So.
Have we ever thought about consolidating facilities, you know, like the Ricketts and Charter Oak? out
We
there?
have.
You know,
I was told a long time ago. Okay, and this is
Okay.
verbatim. The Dow City, or the Buck Grove shop burned. Okay, it burned down. There was a fire, you know, burned it down. And we moved that operator to Dow City and operated out of there for about 6-8 months, perfectly fine. I suggested that we not replace the Buck Grove shop. This was filled with people that thought otherwise.
oh, really?
And
Huh.
I think the board member at that time said, Paul, sometimes it's not about money.
And that's why.
So
I
we
asked
built a
the
new
question.
shop in Buck Grove.
Okay, well, because I've been hearing the same thing. People wonder why we're, you know.
I mean,
Like a small
I
town
think
business.
I think it makes perfect sense, but people are very protective of their shop in their area.
Their church.
Well, I was just, you know, you obviously to your future shops, I mean, I don't know, Ricketts doesn't work very well, but Charter Oaks have been a projected.
Yeah.
You know, so if you consolidated them somehow, I mean, I know there's a bit of a reach up to that top corner, but.
Yeah,
Because there really is no, I would imagine, a rule of thumb that says based on square miles of a county or
Yeah.
population of a county,
Yeah.
here's how many county shops we need within that county. I would think every county,
I don't know that there's a general,
right, I think
It's-
every county would be different.
they're all different, right? And it's what the people want. You know, I mean, they're the roads belong to them. It's what they want. And that was clear that day.
Yeah.
Okay, was that people in that area
Wanted to shop.
and the board collectively wanted to shop there.
Well,
And so we did it, you know, and so from that point forward, I kind of just backed off and said, hey, you know, I'm not gonna go to consolidating shops. We've eliminated actually 2. We had one in Deloitte. Okay, we didn't have that anymore. And that was kind of, you know, the same thing is you look at how do you operate more efficiently?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to have 11 different shops?
Well, that's.
Well, probably not. I think if we had 4 strategically located throughout the county and one in Edison, it probably would work out. Okay, and then we had Dick Hugh, who was an operator that operated, out of his home down in that Dunlap area, north of Dunlap. We just paid rent. He stayed in the shop, had a fuel barrel out there. He had it in his shop.
His own.
That worked out really well. You know, and so, yeah. Don't go there. if the
Okay.
people
Well, I
don't want it.
If-
So that's
if-
where we ended up.
Backstory on
If
that.
that's what it is, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, you know, you're
Yeah.
looking at ways to save money.
Oh,
If
yeah.
we're paying
Yeah.
for less electric and less gas and,
Mhm.
but we would actually increase more depreciation on the machines because they're gonna have to drive further to get to the work
Yeah,
for
every
to
day.
get there. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's always a little bit of a.
There's trade-offs and, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you are elected to represent the people. I work, you know, to do what the people want, you know, out there and that's what they wanted.
Sure, that makes sense.
So-
I never even knew that. So I mean,
Yeah.
appreciate that information.
Yeah, yeah. So,
How long ago was that approximately?
I think I shot her in 08 or 09. Yeah. We had a brand new motor grader sitting in the newest motor grader.
Burned up.
They burned it down.
Oh,
That's when we got introduced to the M motor. Cause the newest one to replace that one.
It was an M and we didn't really want it. We didn't want the first generation. We were sad. We were disappointed when we got it.
Yes, we were.
Yeah, it was not a good thing. So yeah, grading, bridge crew continue to work the roadside. They're gonna probably wrap up most of the seeding this week. I mean, it's a little rain. If any of you have been to Buck Grove lately, okay, take a look at the bridge. The showcase project. The grass is like carpet green right now, and it just looks really nice. So, and a little history there. I mean, that is actually not necessarily on public right of way, but that bridge was basically handed over. There's an agreement. I have it filed now. The county will take care of that because they realigned that road and eliminated 2 bridges on the system in exchange for
One bridge.
that bridge. Yeah. So that's an agreement that made a lot of sense and was allowed a nice straight roadway down there. As opposed to having a couple of bridges to take care of, we just have the one. And that bridge right there will last a long, long time. So, the bridge up on E16. So signing the final right of way documents today on this. And this bridge should be it's a bridge on E16, about 2.25 miles west of E16 L51 corner. We're gonna replace that with a twin box culvert, receiving some Hungry Canyons funding, $160,000 to help pay for the flume portion of that. And the rest will be coming out of a combination of our BR funds and farm market. So, nice project. Get rid of that bridge. The estimate's just under $1 million. I'm gonna give you an exact number because they're modifying the riprap a little bit. I didn't like to finish that up, so that'll change the number. But it's just under $1 million. The estimated cost, which is right in line with what we estimated early on. So,
Where do the primary of them funds come from?
highway bridge program funding, our annual allocation,
Annual
which
allocation.
varies, and so that'll take care of this. And then, the bridge at Vale, which is in the city limits of Vale.
That's that first bridge.
That's the one on M55, which, we recently just posted. But they ran they're running the analysis on statewide bridges to see which ones will fall into the approval area for city bridge funding. So I'm hoping that we're gonna score good enough and get in there. We'll find out here in a couple of weeks. So we need to approve the plan, sign these, I'll get them back to the consultant. We'll get this thing ready and the letting should all fall into place for like a January letting and we'll build this next year.
Well, we're gonna approve.
second,
Okay, there was a motion for the plans and specifications for the bridge replacement project number BRS CO 131/60/24 bridge replacement project over small stream on County Road E16 North Line Section 21 T85N. Are you writing that down as fast as I'm saying it?
Absolutely.
Okay, good job. R41W. All right, motion was made by
that's one.
Just pass it.
Gene. He made the motion, no, Kyle made the motion, Gene seconded.
Yes.
Okay, got it straight. All right, all in favor, state so by saying aye. Opposed, no. Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Doesn't matter what order is.
Okay, next up.
The Scout Clean Energy, been working with them. We've met with them a couple of times. You're probably familiar. There's a wind turbine project proposed near west side, southwest side, in the center of Carroll, kind of just a little bit. But anyhow, they've been very good to work with, but we're working through the details of an agreement. And I sent a copy of the comment up to your office last week, and I don't know, there's a real huge sense of urgency, but I just wanted you to kind of get some eyes on it, just see if you saw anything in there that looked kind of odd. But the first draft was totally not acceptable for us. So I met with them. We kind of hashed out some revisions, and there's still some revisions in here that I want to kind of tweak with them. But generally, here's what we did the last time we had one. It worked out really well. These people are generally pretty professional, and what we found is that they'll generally do what you ask them to do. But a number of things that come to rise. One is the usage of the roads. Okay, and it's what I call usage above and beyond what we would normally expect to see. And so, then there's the roadway intersection modification, which they've got large loads that come in and you have to kind of widen the intersection. And then the so those are really the three key areas that we deal with. And so, the maintenance of the road, the last time we just hired a retired blade operator and had a blade, in the area and a small dump truck, and he just took care of it. Whatever time he had, whatever materials he used, we sent him a bill for it. And it was less than $20,000. I mean, the total,
That's a good
I think,
idea.
was close to 10 or 12, I think, or something like that, but it wasn't a lot of money. Now, that could vary depending on what they do and the roadway conditions at the time too. So they're wanting us to kind of hold to a number, and I don't want to do that. You know, we're just, you know, so we'll have to kind of hash out that, but that's how we did it the last time. It worked really well. That person just came in and it's needed and took care of that. And I'm hoping we can find one of our retired blade operators.
So Sean just keeps a close eye on it, and calls
Yeah,
that person
yeah.
when he needs it.
Yeah, you know, and or that person just hops in a pickup, drives out, and takes a look at it.
Okay.
You know, and knows where the roads are, where the heavy use areas are. So it worked out pretty well. You know, what we don't want is them to have the liability, you know, we don't want somebody else taking care of our roads. And I think that's the key thing here is that if there's gonna be maintenance on our roads, we're gonna do it, and they'll just reimburse us for it.
When do they plan on starting?
I don't know. I think there's still a lot of details being worked out. They had some issues with connecting their main transmission line and, you know, jockeyed around with that. We met with them on a couple of utility permit things too. But I haven't gotten from them on that yet. So we're working on that. And then, up on E16, the bridge west of the one that we're gonna replace, you know, there's a dip in the pavement. It's got a history of that post slab kind of going down. So sound concrete, so we're just gonna put an asphalt wedge in there. 10 Point has bought a new paver, and so we working with them to kind of put an asphalt wedge in, because it's just hard to get a big contractor in here. So we took care of the bump at the bridge. We got a little bump where you come off the asphalt wedge. We're gonna go up there and kind of trim that off a little bit. So if somebody said something, you know,
You're working.
we're working on it. And we're working with them to try to get, you know, this is new to them too. Okay, and so it's kind of a learning for everybody, but it's important to have people in the area that can do things like that.
Yeah.
Because there's times where we need those kind of things, so we're trying to kind of work through that. Got a little bump, we'll take care of it. Somebody says something, but otherwise I think it turned out pretty good.
I'd say having a competent crew in our local area, boy, I tell you, they've done a great job on 30. I know that's not our responsibility,
Yeah.
but man, that's really shaped that up nice.
Well, it is, and you know, every once in a while you have that where you just want to do an asphalt wedge. It's
Yeah.
fairly economical, take care of a problem. But, you know, we had inroads, do a couple of them, but they, you know, they're doing them as a favor.
Yeah.
But they don't really want to go do that type of work, so.
Well, it's nice that they're looking after the home county.
Yeah, you know, I think there's certainly, you know,
We
some
appreciate
need,
that.
is that in that regard, so, yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Hopefully the bridge keeps going.
Can you call?
Yeah, if you got any questions, I have had people come in, I just tell them the truth.
Well, that's all I tell them too.
Well, I'm always telling that, I guess, but.
How do we need Dwayne for the next maintenance?
We got nothing to hide and, I just hope it goes through. So.
Yeah, it'll be a nice.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your efforts. Thanks. All right, we gotta hold on just a second. Dwayne's not up here.
All right.
Designated representative.
I told my husband this and then they
What's that?
Talking out loud, thinking out loud.
Thinking out loud, okay.
Good. He doesn't have-
Requesting some expert advice from myself.
Oh, he doesn't have coverage? Oh, he does not, for sure.
From yourself. Okay.
Sounds like you're
Talking to myself, that's what I'm always asking. I just put-
Yeah.
It
sounded like a Sheldon Cooper moment. All right, there's Miss Marcy.
All right, perfect.
All right. Okay, next up on the agenda is discuss take action abatement, 1673 Boyer Boulevard, Deloitte, Tyler and Mackenzie Collins, new house.
We got two of them each. So Tyler and Mackenzie Collins, north of Deloitte off Blue Year Boulevard, a couple miles. There was some lots developed there a few years ago by a doctor, not that it's relevant, but. And so that they've decided to build there. So they have their building permit and they have their urban revite or tax abatement. They're looking for the 3-year 100%. And we checked the property and they had the foundation excavated. Whatever day they signed this, I was trying to find the date. No, on the 26th, and I was there that afternoon and they had excavated the foundation as all. So my opinion would be to approve their application.
And how much is the, price evaluation?
So they put $600,000 down on their building permit.
It's just a standard house, not one of those houses.
Gates are required.
All right,
All right, I didn't, you didn't. Okay, motion's made by Ms. Hayden, seconded by Mr. Mulbauer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next one on the agenda is tax abatement 3291 360th Street, Manila. Chad and Erica Mulbauer, new house.
What do you have for an address there, Terry?
This is 1391, 360th Street.
Okay. 3291
3291.
Yep, is the right one.
That's what's on our agenda.
Okay, all right.
What did I say? I said.
You said,
3291.
okay. I was just,
For the new
and
construction, right? Yeah.
that was like, evidently, their current mailing address caught me. So
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we had the right address. So,
Yep, sounds good.
so again, we were there the day after they, filled out their building permit and their tax abatement application. And, they also are saying the $600,000 range and the 3-year 100%. So they've met all the requirements and I would recommend approving theirs.
So moved. What was the value of that one again?
Second. 600.
600,
Yep.
good. Okay, motion was made by Mr. Dozark, seconded by Mr. Schultz. Any further discussion, questions? None? All in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Chair votes aye, motion carried. Next
Just
on
to-
the,
Just to add, I guess that on the Idlewood Circle one that we approved, what, last week or 2 weeks ago? I mean, they were pouring concrete there yesterday.
so
So
good.
things do happen once they get the.
Once we get done.
Would like to see new homes being built.
oh, I,
You got a front row seat on that one, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering why that concrete truck was coming up right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Now, look, I said, oh, good.
There's a reason, huh?
Excellent. Going to work already.
Thank you, thank you. It's always nice to we're doing new construction. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion PTO transition. I suspect, this has got to do with the questions that have been bouncing around for actually about 6 months, I've heard. Comments and questions about, making this simpler because boy, I'll tell you, whenever we ask, who's got what for how this stuff works, it's, and I noticed that most companies have actually transitioned to a PTO exclusive operation. And I guess I don't know for sure how this was put on the agenda, but I mean, maybe it was because some of us discussed it. Did you?
I think I did, but,
Okay.
I think we.
Yeah, you all
last
asked
week-
to have it on the agenda last
Did
week.
we all ask last week? I mean, I didn't know if anybody had forwarded the idea. So I wanted to-
I made a note of it on our last agenda.
and I
'cause y'all
think
said to
the
do that.
conversation last week was that there's so many different baskets to choose from
Yeah.
and it gets confusing.
Yep.
And, the hospital, I believe, has transitioned to that and they say they love it.
Yeah.
Yesterday, we did talk to Jack just a little bit about how that works and he was going to send us, did he send you
You
anything?
did not
He
send
did
me
not.
anything.
He was gonna, kind of send the information that he has used. He said that he has talked to 3 other counties about possibly making that transition, and he said after they looked at the pros and cons and how it would actually work, none of the counties have, taken the opportunity or the step forward to do the PTO time off.
They didn't think it was.
It's not cut and dry.
It's a difficult transition.
It's a transition more than the
It's a difficult
doing.
transition,
You
so.
don't just do it.
No, there's a lot to
Yeah.
consider as far as, how much you
That's what
have
I-
in your banks now, how to transition that over to paid time off. And
There's
so
a lot to
it's
consider.
there's a lot to consider.
That was kind of my question. It's gonna be how the sick leave and comp time and all that. How do you
Right.
change, how do you have to buy that out? and then everybody
Yeah.
starts at the same.
That's kind of how I was
Starting
understood.
point.
And unfortunately, we do not have the information today, and it's not a take action. It was just to kind of get that conversation going. To see if there's an interest in it.
And there'll be more conversations about it, I'm sure, but.
Amy, in your HR experience, do you have any answers to what Gene just brought up? I mean, is there any experience you got with the transition period? I mean, obviously what I've found out is that you're gonna most likely have to buy out the stuff that's currently there.
And that could bankrupt the county if you're talking about the sick leave.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that have 90 days on the books.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot. I mean, it kind of is not there to be used as vacation.
Yeah.
So to transition 90 days to a vacation policy doesn't make sense. But if you take away 90 days of sick leave from someone, especially if they know they have a 12-week surgery coming up, people are gonna not be happy with that. The other thing I will say is you can't put comp in the PTO bucket.
Okay.
Because that's earned at time and a half. That has to be in a separate bucket. I know some people or some counties, when they have PTO, they will have a bucket for maternity leave, paternity leave. So that is something to think about. Bereavement might also be in a different bucket because it's not really a bucket. It's, kind of whenever it happens. And I'm sorry, I have to get back on this webinar. And the other thing to consider is PTO, you can cap it. So like from year to year, it can only be so much and you can't carry over so much. But I think if it's under PTO, and I have to look into this, I'm not 100% sure. But at time of, whenever your employment ends, I believe you have to pay out 100% PTO. So that would be something else to consider. So, and with that, I gotta get back.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So,
Thank you.
Way too much.
right.
to take care of.
We did not have, we just talked about it a little bit last week and put it on and it stayed on and there's just.
Well, we've just talked about ways to make things simpler. I mean, we didn't know if this was a thing since companies were going to it, but Mr. Mulbar?
If we could get through this transition period and rip the Band-Aid off and pay out hypothetically, how does our department head feel about it? I mean, Paul, is this something that would simplify time off? I mean, Sherry, Colin,
Honestly, I haven't really thought about it.
not to put you guys on the spot, but I mean, I'd like your input.
Yeah.
I know that in the 5 years I've been here, one other time this was on the agenda and we talked about it. And because of the tenure of some of our employees, like Amy said, the amount of sick time that they have, it would be a very difficult transition, is what I was told.
And I think that was the basic takeaway from Jack is that, the transition could be difficult.
And I don't think it would be fair for somebody if they had the sick time of the books and knew they had a big surgery come up. And they
Absolutely.
lost track.
It does not fit very.
Right, I don't know that it accommodates that kind of thing, and that'd be hard on some of our employees.
Right?
So,
It'd be like taking a benefit away from them, in my
Right.
opinion.
right, kind of.
Mr. Schultz?
Just don't understand why we'd have to change that bank when we could just change the way new PTO is accumulated.
So
That's
they
what,
have,
that's what confuses me, because if you're sitting there with 90 days or whatever in a bank of sick leave, why do we have to take that,
Pay it
pay that back? Why do we have to pay that out instead of just move from your anniversary date? Saying, okay, you're not gonna get 4 weeks vacation and 8 days sick leave, you're gonna get 48 or whatever, 48.
Variable amount of time, just as
Yeah,
PTO.
that's what and you take it accordingly. When you take a day off, it just subtracts off the top of that. There's no, I'm gonna take 8 hours of sick and 2 hours of vacation.
No.
and then you take it all as vacation time, you're gonna give them 3 months of extra vacation time.
Well, that is that.
No,
What do you mean, 3 months extra vacation time?
Because
If
if you
it's
just,
in PTO, you can use it for anything, vacation or sick.
Yep.
So you transition it into a PTO bank, you're letting them choose if they want to use it as a sick day or vacation day, the way I understand it.
that's the way. I just think,
Good
you know.
do present employees keep that at that point though? I mean, we transition from that point going forward?
And those are.
I mean, you'd have silos to
Those are things
manage
we
as
gotta
long as
figure
those
out.
people are, until that's used up or, I mean, there'd be extra to manage. I mean, I don't know if that's possible.
Somebody at the hospital, see how they transition to it.
Yeah, that
Can
might
I ask why anybody wants to do this at all? What is the big deal?
I was just thinking the same thing, I guess, what's the
So
benefit to the
why
county?
now? After how many years of it
Change.
working just
Right.
fine, are we deciding to change it? What's the deal?
be, sounds like it's easier to manage
For who?
for the people that gotta manage it.
And who would that be?
The department heads, HR.
We don't have any problem managing it. Do you, Colin?
I mean, I guess, no, it's the system we use, so I work within the system.
It's
I
been
mean-
for 35 years for me down there. I see no reason for it to change, but that's.
I'll be here retiring too, so somebody, the
I
next
guess-
person might find it more difficult.
Maybe what brought that up was the instance that one vacation was being had, and then they got sick while they're on vacation, so they switched from vacation to sick leave while on vacation, so.
Just a little,
So if this was all under one bank, it's like, you do whatever you want
Whatever
while
you
you're
want.
off, while you're off, you're, you know.
and it's not an action item, so it's not like we just wanted to get that out there. for
Yeah,
department heads.
that's, we're just discussing.
I understand
If it
we're
was-
just
yeah,
discussing. I just
yeah.
was curious what brought it up, what
Just-
happened.
Nothing in particular, just the different baskets that there are to choose
Yeah.
from and kind of, it was just all in one basket. Though the doctors know that you need it, you don't have to say your child was sick, so you want, so just, you
Yeah,
got this much time,
that's never been a problem for me.
yeah.
I don't know if it, yeah.
It just wanted to,
Well, we've had issues with it, so that's why I brought it to the table.
so, yeah, I guess we can move on because we don't have all the information we need and, just, get it out there and think about it. If anybody thinks it'd work in their department, but, not to take action, just.
I do feel like if it is gonna move forward,
Mhm.
you have to have buy-in from the department
Right,
heads
right.
that wanna make that change.
That would see the
That if they feel
benefit
like it's
to,
beneficial to their
yeah.
employees underneath there.
Yeah. But when Jack says that the transition is difficult, I listen to that and think, well, it's gonna be difficult, maybe we just don't wanna do that, so.
I mean, even this short 10-minute meeting has come up with, 3-4 different options of moving forward. I'm sure there's even more, if we sat here another 10 or
Right.
15 minutes, we could come up with 2 or 3 more.
And we haven't
So-
gotten any information from, officially what he presents, and so if there's not a, temperature for it, there's nothing that, and it doesn't.
So, yeah.
And I'm speaking for myself, I would really need to know the fine details.
Right.
To know whether or not it'd be,
What really does
It
happen
would
for
work
sick time,
for my
how that
office.
comp time works,
Right.
and really, if you're still gonna have 3 other, baskets out there, how does that simplify anything? And so it may not fit for the way that Crawford County does things, and, it's always worth a look at it and see if anybody's interested. That's the whole reason. So start thinking about it. We'll get more information from Jeff maybe, and, just see if there's any advantages, and if not,
So Gene, you said the hospital switched
yes,
towards it?
they
Are
do.
they the only ones that you're aware of?
Well,
In Crawford
The bank
County?
had, PTO time. They switched it over while I was there, and I remember it being difficult, but then once you got used to it, it seemed okay,
I
but
would
yeah.
think that the employees would like it better, but I guess I don't know that, just so you can use some of that sick leave as vacation time.
Yeah, yeah,
So I guess from a competitive, when you're out there competing, trying to get employees, if more employers of the county were using the system, then maybe you'd wanna do it just so you're, competing if the people are trying to hire say, well, man, I'd rather work here because I got a PTO, and I like that.
and I guess
I
we
don't-
have to find counties that are using it to see how they like it, how they made the transition. I guess it would be up to the board if they wanna listen to a presentation from Jack, so we have the facts, or not all just speculating and guessing. I really have no opinion, just trying to make it easier rather than having to have a doctor's excuse, or, if you're taking a child to the doctors, you're gonna take that out of family leave, or if you're gonna take it out of sick time, or just comp time or vacation. It's all in there. You can take your child to the doctor, if it's necessary.
I'm no expert on PTO, like my brother down in Kansas City gets it, he works for the federal government. In general, I think it works, it's good for like new employees, but I think the concern for, I have 90 days of sick leave built up, I have for a long time. If you go to PTO, I have 90 days of sick leave, I have 20 days of vacation. Generally, I would assume when you go to a PTO bank, you're not gonna give me 110 days of PTO. it's gonna be like 30.
There's a difficulty.
So we're gonna, someone who's been here a long time and has a big bank is gonna lose a whole bunch.
Either that
One,
or
or I don't know about the
make another
payout or
basket,
whatever.
you know, have it, I don't know if you can have that as a
Right,
basket.
so I think that'd be the biggest issue is,
That's the
with
difficulty.
the long, people that have lots of big banks, this won't be great for them probably.
Well, we certainly would want to take time away.
You know,
Paul?
Craig, I mean, Craig, you bring up a good point, you know, it's being competitive in the marketplace. A new employee may look at PTO as a benefit, you know, depending on how it's structured. You know, so what you could do is have all new employees have that, you know, you have.
Well, that was what I was kind of getting at earlier.
And then, and I maybe missed out on that, and then you could have, you know, most of our employees are 10 years or less, secondary roads right now. And there's just a few of us that are above that number anymore. You know, so you could offer it and you say, well, we'll give you an option, you can either opt in or opt out. You know, if you're 5 years or less, maybe that's better, that's a better option for you. You know, you would have that big bank, so you would have that big bank vacation, you know, might be a better option, so. I think it's not gonna be one size fits all, if that's the decision of the board.
Well, that's just it.
You're gonna have to have some sort of, you know, if it's a transitional system. That'll be, you know, I mean, the last application we had for an opening, we got one applicant. Okay. I mean, we're, you know, we used to get 40. We get one application now, so I mean, you know, being competitive with the private sector is gonna be something that's worth moving forward, and this might be beneficial, I don't know. I just don't know how it's gonna be structured.
Lynn, last time they tried to hire a nurse, one of the reasons that they didn't want to come on board is because they wanted a vacation right away. We weren't offering it if you have that PTO time.
Your guys are talking about that very subject. Eric hit me up the other day at the safety meeting about it.
Can't figure it out.
Yeah.
It might help to entice somebody. if
Well,
they
yeah,
already
it's
have
not
that.
too bad. You know, one thing you did think of is staging in the long-term employees. So like, when Chris has 90 days, give him 3 or 4 years to use that up. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there as an option.
If you're not sick, though. How could you use a sick leave?
Well, it would end up being vacation. If they're gonna use sick time, more likely for their sick time, the PTO is vacation time. For the longer term employees, I mean, they're gonna use it to their advantage. You know, that's gonna happen.
On the benefit aspect of it, if we stage that in where you got some vacation time, you know, not necessarily starting immediately, but you could work it in that first year where your PTO time. Your guys were actually talking about how that whole first year plus, they get no time off. And they've actually approached me about that. So that was one of the other reasons we talked about this PTO is that something that we could transition in, to where they at least have something, you know, I mean, they might have a major family event and their wife's side or their side in that first year of employment. Now, we don't want them to be able to work here. We've had a few people that worked here short term, you know, start here, like it for a little bit, and then they leave, and you're giving vacation away, and they haven't been here long enough to really have some.
I would offer up that, you know, kind of like Susie, but we've not had any problems with the current system, none. I mean, our sick leave, you know, we manage that very well, the vacation time, it's all managed very well, no abuses in any area. The guys are doing a really good job of just using things as it was intended. And so there are no issues that we have right now with the current system. But a new system might be more beneficial to a new perspective.
We're just discussing.
Yeah, we're just,
Yeah,
Sounds to me like maybe we need to
Oh.
figure out a transition to where we start offering it for new employees, seeing if it's feasible for HR to be able to handle that and move forward with that.
we could have,
As an incentive to draw new employees in.
we could ask.
I've
Jack
heard
to
that
do
more than once too, that
next week.
I don't get a day
Hold on,
off
man.
until after I've been there again. Unless you're fortunate enough to have a bad winter and just rack up comp time.
and you
like
get cover
that.
time, but it's a problem for new employees.
Yeah.
Would it be possible, to address that specific issue, would it be possible under our current plan to allow new employees to accrue vacation per paycheck instead of waiting the entire year?
I've heard options where you have an option, the employee would say, I'll buy a week's vacation at start time and then you just take that money back off the top of your paycheck until it's paid for. I mean, that's a paperwork deal too, but that's an option. I've been similar to what you're saying, is a way to offer that to the new employees.
Gene?
I feel like possibly it would be worth having Jack be on Zoom next week and answer some of these questions to feel how difficult it would really be to make the transition, or if it's something we want to implement for new employees as an enticement and a tool to be able to encourage more people to apply for jobs with the county.
Colin, I've got a moderate answer for your question about accrued. Actually, in the military, that's how ours worked. Remember where you had on your pay voucher, it said accrued vacation. So you actually did start building up vacation, but you could say that you're, you know, if we wanted to, worrying about that person that comes in and works 3 months and then bails with a bunch of vacation, and it should say a bunch, but some vacation, I mean, you could say, just like getting insurance, you're not eligible for it until 6 months or something.
Sure.
You see what I'm getting at? That would give, but it would provide, you know, what some of your guys have brought up to me, Paul, you know, about having some vacation available. And I mean, they can take vacation, time off, they're just not gonna get paid for it before then. So, and that's hard for a young family to digest, I get it. So that's one of the other things that we're looking at here. I mean, is there ways that actually starts to help those types of issues?
So do we want to put it on the agenda and department head to come with some questions and see?
Jack's available.
See if Jack's available first.
I'd rather see you present.
And Amy,
Jack,
Come on in person?
if you
Can do it
can.
over.
have him in person and the pic.
A more efficient use of the, would it be a more efficient use of the board's time to have Jack meet with the department heads? Just to kind of get their temperature and walk them through some things? Because if you have all the department heads against the board, that politically, that can be a little bit more difficult, and it's better to have buy-in from, you know,
Absolutely.
more of the departments than
That's a
less of
good
the
idea.
departments.
Good
That's
idea.
good.
Sounds good to me.
That's,
Power to the people.
Well, this is what we're trying to do is,
it's,
you
And if it
know,
goes nowhere, we stay where we're at and it works too.
we got no pony in the show. It's for.
yeah, we don't have a,
We
I don't
are
know
your
if
ponies,
I don't get
so,
PTO.
Yeah, all right, well, personally, I don't have.
Oh,
a
you-
pony. I appreciate that, so.
we're trying to actually look after, help you guys.
That sounds
with
good.
our
Let's
objectives.
let the department heads meet with Jack and.
Yeah, why don't we establish something that way?
All right, we'll talk to Jack. see what he thinks, and
Any
then we'll-
questions about that? You guys, do we have somebody that wants to take the lead on discussing that with Jack and lining it up?
I get email out.
All right.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
Mr. Johnson.
We can't take.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else on that subject. Thank you for the discussion. It was a good discussion. All right, discussion, 37.5 hour work week and computing comp time. Obviously, a recent issue in the courthouse has brought this to the forefront. And, there was some questions asked, and I've even actually talked to old supervisors or older not age-wise, but past supervisors. How's that? Sound a little bit more politically correct. Past supervisors. And just trying to figure out what this is and where it came from. I mean, the logic kind of escapes me. I've really never heard of it anywhere else. I'm sure somewhere somebody must have it, or they got an idea that this was a good idea. But, in my research, I found, and anybody can correct me anytime if I misunderstood something. 37.5 hours was instituted to help, in particular, the staff on the second floor and other floors to get some paperwork done at the end of the day with a half hour extra, but basically close the courthouse, but they still continue to work their 40-hour, you know, their 8-hour day and finish out the day. And then, that gave them an extra half hour when there wasn't traffic coming in and sitting down at their table and interrupting their ability to file reports or whatever they have to do.
Frequent phone calls.
So am I pretty close there? All right. So we're trying to figure out if that's at 4:30 and I'm here, not every day for sure, but I mean, there's a lot of times that I'm sitting in here doing a Zoom meeting or something. And this place is pitch dark at 4:30. So, I mean, now there's times that I see Sherry over here doing stuff or Terry's and her doing things. I mean, it's like you guys are doing your cleanup for the end of the day, but a lot of times staff seems to be, not all of them always. This isn't an absolute, but there's a lot of times and maybe I'm just lucky I'm on the days that everybody came in earlier, took a shorter lunch or did something where they're gone. So, I mean, in the interest of the 40-hour work week, which is how I understood that was it was still supposed to be a 40-hour work week. And then we turned around and we were handing off some comp time when people would come in early on this and they had to work more than 37 and a half hours. Now, I don't know that that's accurate, but that probably needs to be discussed and we need to get to the bottom of whether or not that's accurate. I mean, that seem fair? Does anybody else? Okay,
Once
Jean?
again, I feel it's an inconsistency that I kind of feel goes on between different silos. That I'm under the impression that you get paid for 40 hours, but you only work 37 and a half. Is that how that works?
Exactly how it's presented to me when I took office by the former treasurer.
But
Okay,
that's not for every office.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, not for-
Not us either.
See,
Yeah.
but I don't know how.
yeah, see, that's what we're trying to get to
I
the,
understand.
trying to understand.
Because it's not fair if somebody's working 37 and a half hours getting paid for 40, but everybody else has to work 40 to get paid for 40. And then I'm told that that is actual comp time, and the policy says you can't get comp time till after 40, but you get comp time when you've only worked 37 and a half. And if you're working 40 in the seat, and everybody else is bugging out and getting paid, how does that seem uniform for the, the person that does payroll? How everybody's doing a little bit different. So
Paul?
once again, it's just a discussion, no take action, just kind of.
Our staff has always worked 40 hours.
Yep.
We work for 40 hours.
And we're not accusing anybody, but we did hear that this
Just that that's how we always.
might be happening out there, so we're trying to get to trying to sort through it and make sure that everything's consistent, cause you said your department's doing it,
Yep.
so
Yeah,
you sure don't wanna hear that somebody else isn't.
now you're hearing it, yeah.
Exactly,
So
so,
my department is typically not done in 37 and a half, but I was told if they were, they would leave in that time period.
And still get paid.
And still get paid.
See, there's the, and I was told that that's comp time, but in the manual, it says you can't get comp time till after 40. So if you're getting comp
when
time
Amy, she
daily,
was in
I
there, not on that
never get comp time, yes.
webinar,
Right.
but I
so how do
understand.
they get paid if they're not working if it's not comp time?
The payroll, they just get 40 hours. I mean, they're
Right.
paid for 40 hours.
It's the salary. So it's an annual salary divided by 26 pay periods. That's how they're paid.
Okay,
The comp, like Sherry said, doesn't come till after 40.
okay,
For someone that works 37 and a half hours or is a 37 and a half hour employee and can work more than that. You're saying I believe the handbook does say that they don't earn comp up to 40, but we are required by law to pay our employees for every hour that they work.
Sure.
So if they do work over the 37 and a half hours, it either needs to go in the comp bank at straight time or it needs to be paid.
I have a question. How do you declare that you're a 37 and a half hour employee and everybody else has declared that they're a 40-hour employee? If I was a 40-hour employee.
Where did that start?
You know what? I don't even know. I feel like
mine.
mine was that way when I started
But yours
and
are 40-hour employees.
mine are 40, but they don't always work the 40. I mean, sometimes they do. We have elections, we have things.
Yeah, but they would get comp for that extra.
They
time.
would get up till 40, they're paid. It would be over 40 is when they would earn any type of comp time.
So when you fill out the timesheet, if you're a 37 and a half hour employee, do you actually physically put down that they were here from 8 to 4:30?
They
Or
put
you
down
put
37 and a half hours or
Yeah.
38 hours or 39 hours.
Whatever time
whatever
they
it
actually
was.
work.
And if it's anything over 40, then they're
Okay.
getting comp time or overtime for it, whatever the department has
But
discussed.
they don't at 37 and a half.
No,
They just.
40 is where the comp
Getting
time
paid
starts.
for 40, so I can keep them there for 40 without paying them any extra, is what
Okay.
I was always
Okay,
told.
okay.
Okay,
I've never even heard anything about it till just recently that we have probably.
see,
more
but
than 30
that was the only thing is that when,
Sorry, no, I'm just, Jody and I are 37, you're 37 and a half.
see, that was the only thing that I was a little perplexed about was when they said that the 37 and a half was created so that, in particular like yours, where there's a crap load of paperwork throughout the day, there's a lot of paperwork, all right, not a crap load. You get a lot of paperwork.
Yep.
So to file all that at the end of the day, you needed that extra half hour of alone time, so to speak, where it was just you at your desk to get it all entered and sent off to And I work with the Department of Transportation fair enough that I see that if you don't file things right away, it's that much longer it takes to get back. Now, I know they're better than they used to be, mind you, but still. So that makes sense to me that you guys would need that half hour, that 4:30 to 5.
Right.
But if that was what it was designed for, and then we just take off, I mean, now, luckily, the taxpayers have got used to being here by 4:30. But if, some of them that work late, if they could get here at 5, that's kind of cutting them short. If that would be the case. That's the only thing I'm looking at on this, is 37 and a half. Have somebody, Colin?
When you were talking to the past supervisors, did they remember passing some kind of resolution, or did it pre-existing in them?
It pre-existed that.
Would there be some kind of resolution back in the files, gathering dust, that maybe would outline
Or
more
new computer
specifically
system?
the origins?
They're not in there.
Do you even know it was a resolution at all? Or
Yeah,
was
we
it just
don't.
kind of one of these practices that came about?
Jerry Goldberg.
Wonder if it was
Jerry Goldberg.
yeah, Jerry's got some experience and time.
She got a lot of history here, so.
She might know.
She might remember.
Maybe we should contact her. Or what about, Chuck? He's the oldest guy in or not age, right? He's been here the longest, thank you.
Experience time.
He's been here the longest.
Before.
He might remember.
Long time, and if there's actually been a resolution that's been passed, I mean, we're sitting here barking up a tree.
Once
that-
again, just for discussion, no action, just to kind of get that conversation going.
Good, we need to do some more research.
And so know that
Right.
whether it's a 37 and a half hour or 40-hour comp and vacation are earned, used appropriately.
That's the other thing. When you're on
Yes.
vacation, you're a 37 and a half hour employee, but even though you're not here, you're gonna be paid for 40 hours and, right?
No,
No? Wrong?
no,
Is everybody
that's
in
not
the
what I just said. I said
salary?
they're earned and paid. The salary is still based off of their salary.
Okay. I said it
Oh, yeah.
similar, but not exactly.
Yeah, no. I get what you're saying.
I got what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
We're just trying to find our ways through the wicket here because nobody, and Colin, in fairness to your answer, nobody knew. And actually, that was one of the things that was said to me. Maybe you should ask Chuck because he's been here the
That
longest. He
has
might
been
know.
suggested.
He might remember. He does a good job of keeping an eye on us youngsters.
I do have some discussion in my office about this occasionally. I mean, it is kind of sad when my staff sees other people walk out the door at 4:30 and they're expected to stay until all of our balance gets done. So
Oh, then
that is an issue in my office.
that's why it's here, because, which kind of feeds into our next item, it's in the policy.
We're
And
not picking on any department here. I want you to understand that. We're trying to figure this out so there's nothing
thing, we would just.
going forward that's
Now, what we
creating.
find out is, even timesheets look completely different from, department, which is, uniformity, which we could almost have put everything together. Policy manual, what the policy says and what's actually been done, maybe aren't exactly the same, so we maybe need to tweak our policy.
Colin?
Just an example, of some real world impact, like Bonnie and Joni are hourly, they're not salary. They're 40 hours a week straight. There's no 37 and a half a week, it's just 40 hours.
Mhm.
So that comes with a lot of differences when they look at their counterparts in other departments. Employees who work 37 and a half hours a week get paid for 40, while my staff is working a straight 40. That is a 6.25% difference in work time. You stretch that out over 250 days of that average work year, days work, that's 15 and a half days.
Yep.
So
And
my
that's why-
staff
Yep.
works literally 15 and a half days more by being a straight 40-hour work week staff. And on top of that, compared to 37 and a half hour employees, their dollar per hour is deflated. Because effectively, if you work 37 and a half,
It's inflated.
it's inflated.
Right.
And it matters with accrual of vacation and sick.
Yep.
Other departments, and it's just, I'm not advocating to take things away from people, but this is just an illustration of how things operate in my office.
Yeah, well, Colin, the biggest thing that probably is not the reason that, that I thought it was a good idea, it was on the agenda, is that we don't know what its purpose was. I mean, nobody understands. I mean, because you can't find anything. So when I was told that it was so that they had an extra half hour, that makes sense. To do paperwork at the end of the day, but they still weren't leaving until their 8 hours was accomplished. But if we're leaving that half hour early every day, I mean, that isn't fair to your staff
That's not fair.
or anybody else's staff that's working the full 8 hour days. And that's, to me, it's one of them where, when we look back at when they were writing the Constitution, what was their intent? What was it isn't always the letter of the law, it's the intent of the law, I guess is what they like to say. So I mean, that's what that's what I think this needs to be. That's why we got obviously more research, and we were kind of hoping somebody knew.
I think that the intent was exactly that. They closed the courthouse, at 4:30.
Which makes
Give
sense.
everybody a chance to make those phone calls you didn't have a chance to do, get ready for tomorrow and have that time, and everybody should go home at 4:00. But the supervisor I talked to was like, that lasted exactly a week, and then all the doors were shutting at 4:30 and they were gone. And, it's just been going on.
So that supervisor was there, he, she, whoever.
No, they just kind of remember the other,
Okay.
I can't find a supervisor that's been around that long. They're
Well,
all
maybe there isn't. I
on
don't
the
know
other
that.
side of the dirt, I think.
Seems to me we have a record of
They
it.
say it's been going on a long time, but the other
Minutes.
thing is if you do the math on that, if everybody's getting paid an extra 2.5 hours a week, it amounts to around $3,000 a year that that is just,
Per person.
yeah,
Yeah, there you
times
go.
100 employees, times 52
And it's
weeks,
like,
times.
that's the point Colin brought up.
Colin did it.
And I think the history of my office, 40-hour work week, when I talk to my longstanding employees, is that when Mike Munt took over the office, it was a part-time prosecutor's office, and he had a part-time private practice, and they had an 8-hour workday in their private practice, so they just mirrored their 8-hour private workday with the 8-hour public workday. Because to be a part-time county attorney, you have to spend at least 50% of your time on county business, either prosecuting or otherwise. And so it made it even kind of 4 and 4, just easy to digest and easy for the math. And then when Judge Saylor took over and we came over here, the practice just followed.
Yeah.
It's just a discussion item also, just to kind of get out there,
But obviously it's, it might even brought the people didn't even realize was going on. I mean,
Well,
so
that's
I think it's just something that needs to be clarified moving forward. So, I mean, we needed to have the discussion. We need to see what was the intent, if it's a valid intent. Otherwise, if it was intended to give you a half hour at the end of the day, then obviously we need to rectify what we're doing if we're not doing it that way. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of not doing it, but there was some discussions got brought up in our most recent issue that that might have been part of an issue. So I don't want to say anything because there's more digging to do, obviously. So anyway, that's it on that. Does anybody else got anything further on 37, 73 and a half? How about that? There we go. Let's rock this party. Get something done this week. On the 37 and a half hour work week. Hearing nothing else, let's move on to the next item. Crawford County Employee Handbook and Policy Manual.
it kind of goes hand in hand with the 37.5 hour work week,
PTO, I mean,
Yeah.
it's all.
yeah,
part of
it's
it.
all kind of,
Until we find out. If any of that could change.
Right.
We really,
kind of goes hand in hand with what the policy manual says that we all sign that you're gonna follow and what actually is followed. So how we work with that, it's just a discussion, no take action, just do we follow it or not?
like, most department heads are here and I set it up the meeting last Thursday night that if you have any employees that are gonna retire in the near future, talk to HR before any final paperwork's done. I wanna put a memo out, but most of everybody's here, so. It just makes HR and department heads get together and at least talk face to face about how the retirement.
So promises aren't made.
Yes, so everybody's happy, kosher at the end of the day.
Well, since it's a discussion item, I wasn't here last week, but I did listen to the board meeting last week that's available online. And there was discussion about having the handbook hold sway over the authority of, the statutory authority of elected officials. And I don't know how far this discussion item was meant to talk to that point. But I would have concerns over the idea, that handbooks would be able to be utilized to take away the statutory authority of elected.
Was that word used in there? Statutory authority?
I would never use that word.
Well, I think,
No, I mean, was
I mean, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but there was just this general idea that when I rewatched the meeting from last week, there was this general idea that when we rework the new handbook, that's going to be the thing that, would, if I got the wrong idea, then I apologize, I got the wrong idea, but that's why I said it was a concern. If it's a wrong concern, then I don't have it. But
Dave?
To that, Colin, I think it's just like discussing the PTO with Jack. It would be nice, like we discussed how the policy handbook is best practice. Department heads need to work together with HR, with Jack, our consultant, to what is that best practice? Not so you're confined to a policy handbook, but we come up with the general idea of where we all need to operate.
sure.
Well, you got something to go?
I was just gonna say, from my perspective, last week's meeting, Colin, I don't know if it was ever trying to take power away from elected officials. I was wondering, we were aspiring, my perspective was, what policy handbook, how do we make it work with elected officials? It's not like a private practice or policy handbook set in stone.
right.
To where elected officials, we realize you're unequal to us and we can't control that, but how do you make a policy handbook work with that? That's what I was, my thoughts towards the meeting were last week. It's not that we were trying to take power away from elected officials, it's how do we work together?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the way to do that is to get everyone in ground level. Sorry, Jean.
That's all right. We always talk about elected officials as if department heads are elected officials. And I don't think that anybody's trying to do anything about elected officials. This conversation is about department heads also, who have boards that have the.
Correct.
So we have to kind of talk about elected officials and department heads in two different baskets. So
And
that's.
let's make that mesh between the department heads that are elected officials.
Yeah, well, but.
Is what my point I was trying to bring up.
But there are a few that have special qualifications that elected officials are all equals, we all get that, but there are departments that have their own boards. And how that board gets to interpret the policy manual is kind of the bigger discussion that needs to be had also.
And those boards have to approve that policy handbook.
And if they
or
don't,
be disapproved.
then what do we got? Nothing.
I'd like to interject a little bit too now.
Go ahead.
All right. The handbook is designed to protect the employee and the employer and our taxpayers when it's a public handbook. And to imply that we are trying to do that, the big board of supervisors, are the reason we're discussing it, isn't to control anybody's department. It isn't to tell anybody, nobody even Thursday night, nobody was even trying to tell Dwayne, after all of our advice that we got from even an employment attorney. We were told that you really can't stop the pay. All right, and actually the motion that was made on Thursday night wasn't about stopping the pay. It was about addressing and adhering to the handbook for the good of the county and the good of the county taxpayer. Because this board in particular, in general, is the voice and the eyes and ears. We're kind of like the scouts of the county, and then we're also their voice. You're their attorney. You know, you're their chief deputy for now, but you know, you people are the ones that do them individual tasks. Well, our job is to be their voice, and they're the employer, no different than like when I asked Mr. Lambert the other night if he had his own handbook for his 300 people, which he does, and they abide by that, and he does have the say at the end, because he's a CEO in a private company. Well, we'll follow the handbook on this, or we're gonna adjust it by this, or whatever. I mean, he has that authority. And I would say that our taxpayers probably have that concern and would like for us to manage that handbook so that they don't end up with what you kept reminding us quite vigorously, I might add, that we could end up in a lawsuit. But to me, we could also end up in a lawsuit for not executing our duties. And that's the other thing that we've got to consider is if we're not following a handbook that's designed to create a sense of fairness and fair play for the entire workforce and the managerial force, then we do leave ourselves open to what happened. I mean, Friday already, our HR was already getting contacted about, well, do I have to follow the handbook now? I mean, that's the can of worms that got opened up in this because we sat there and focused on telling Dwayne not to pay, when in fact, that wasn't even the motion. Because of your advice and others that we got, we didn't make that a motion, or at least that's why I believe they didn't make that a motion. But then if he would have actually went back and looked at his time and worked with Amy, they might have been able to solve that problem amicably with Cindy. We just don't know now. We'll never know. She's been paid.
Well,
Gene?
Jack, when I talk to him, he doesn't tell people what they have to do. He tries to guide them to settle for the least amount of damage. That's, cause it seems to me when one person talks to Jack, they can interpret the way he said it to them. And then somebody else call and he, doesn't give the same answer. He had told us that the board needs to decide. That's how that goes. The board decides. And unfortunately, there was information given that there's gonna be, could be lawsuits if you have any interference with that. But I don't know how you could ever make the wrong decision to follow the policy. The policy's out there. And so when somebody says, well, that's just a best practice, then what do we have? How does any department head know what's right and wrong if you can pick and choose the parts of the policy that you want to adhere to? You can say we don't have that policy about retirement. Well, we don't have a retirement about a vacation either then. We can choose not to use that part if we get to pick and choose as department heads. As department heads, if you happen to not like an employee and you're glad they're leaving and you make the decision, well, this time I'm not going to give them that because I can do whatever I want. Now we've got another lawsuit on another playing field. And if we keep everybody the same, all department heads follow the same basic, they're encouraged to follow. We just don't have these issues. But when you go outside of, according to Jack, not following a set system, he encourages people to follow the law of the land, not to go outside of it. It just makes it easier. And when we go outside of it, that's when we have the problems.
And I assume by saying law of the land, you're meaning the guidance that we
Policy
use.
manual
Yeah.
is the Bible, according to some others, counties that I talked to, they consider it the Bible.
I would say that since most businesses, and I'll just interject quick, Dave's got something too. Most businesses, the policy manual or the company handbook actually is under their risk management department, which is usually their legal department. And the risk management has that to exactly do that, manage the risk of lawsuits and issues like that coming up. So to me, what our taxpayers are really wanting from us is to be their team, not to be in conflict. I don't want to run anybody's department. I suspect none of these four do either. We don't want to run your department, but we want to work together with you. And I would hope that it's obvious by why we're checking on PTO in the 37.5 hours, that you see why we're trying to do these things is to work better together as a team better to create a better Crawford County government. A more open one, more transparent and more effective one going forward. That's our objective in all of this.
Fair.
A fair government. Okay, Dave, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my thing is, it is very important, and I think it is gonna be very important going forward to sit down with Jack and have buy-in from all the department heads. So we have that best practice policy handbook. However, if it is the Bible, the end all be all, my fear is, why do we have elected positions then? If Terry has to follow by a policy handbook to the T and not have the flexibility to maybe 5% of the time have to make a decision that doesn't quite fit in the handbook, she's accountable to people because she's elected. If we had a policy handbook that was set in place that is a set all be all, you could just have managers run all those departments.
Correct.
But they're elected. They're elected to serve the people. They do something that isn't good for the county, that is outside of the best practice handbook. People should know and elect differently. But we're gonna sit here and complain about the state handing down and taking away our authority. But yet, at the same time, we're kind of hypocrites saying that all elected officials have to follow to the T a handbook we set.
Is that what you're hearing?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Is that what you're hearing? Okay, well, I would say that, at least go ahead.
I just want, why don't we get together with the department head and same as they're gonna get together with Jack about, we got too many questions to be answered without somebody that maybe has some legal knowledge or counsel as far as, I mean, we could carry this on for, I'm not saying for another hour and still come right back to this spot. I think it's good discussion. It's good to have our elected officials here
And department heads.
and department heads. And have this, because obviously we've been shown there's some flaws in our handbook. And we need to address them, and how can we do it effectively with the makeup that we're trying to happen?
May I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
Do you feel that there's a flaw in our retirement part of it, or is it the 37.5?
Well, it
I
looks
mean,
like PTO,
Yeah.
37.5 hours, retirement. I mean, a handbook is only as good as what you know. I mean, that was put together by people that thought they were covering all the bases until something else comes up.
We'll have the discussion another
I mean,
time.
and we'll
Think we're missing
meet,
in our
we'll
retirement.
revise the handbook and we think we've got it nailed out. That's perfect. Then somebody will be like, yeah, but
You missed it.
But you're never gonna cover
you'll
everything
never
in a
will.
handbook.
That's
You're
why
never
it's
going
an
to.
ever evolving,
And that's not the
it's an
point of a
ever
handbook, I
evolving
don't
book
believe.
though.
But to the point that we're all trying to make, the retirement plan has worked all these years. And if just this one time there, it just didn't make any sense why we would go outside of policy for that particular, because the handbook was pretty solid in what it said to do.
My statement, if everybody would just get together and talk, would be,
Well, but look
Well-
what we ended up with.
Well, and
Somebody
I
else.
guess I'd say move on from this, but since I think there's enough of a discrepancy here. You know, Dave thinks that we're trying to run their departments by suggesting that the handbook, I don't know, I don't understand why it's getting missed. It's like Cullen likes to say, best practice guides. It's our risk management tool for the county. I mean, we're getting hung up on the fact that, Cullen, you gotta do exactly what I say. Well, I don't believe that, and you know that. You know, I can't even start to do your job. How many years of education you got involved in that? I mean, I'm not gonna try to even tell you. I'm not gonna try to tell you how to manage your staff. You've got them doing things I can't even comprehend. I don't know how to tell them to investigate legal procedures or anything to that nature. You know, and over in public health, they got things going on over there, even out of conservation, you know? Everybody's got their own thing. Law enforcement's got laws. I don't think that that's necessarily, but we are concerned with the fact that we didn't have things, there are things that we do have to do the same. You know, computing the 40-hour work week, figuring out vacation time, pro rata payouts. Those things have to remain consistent across the board. That's where our discrepancy is here. It isn't the fact that we want to do your jobs, right? I mean, or want to tell you how to do your jobs. I mean, nobody at this table has ever sounded that back on track and work together to create a handbook that we can all agree with. You know, I mean, that doesn't make any of you feel like you're, you know, because you're gonna have things on the fly. You know, just like we're having budget issues, we got all kinds of stuff to do on the fly, you know, over the next months, probably years. But, you know, we don't know all the things that how it's gonna affect us. So we don't really want you telling us, we gotta have this much. We don't know how much we can afford to give you. We're gonna work on that. We're gonna actually start early this year, but we have no more desire to tell you how to do your staff. So please understand that. I mean, you know, Dave, I hope you ain't getting that from me, that I'm telling them that they need to do that, but they need to adhere to a handbook and its base principles equally across the entire courthouse or the entire county government so that we don't have these issues. And I think that's, I guess that's all I got to say at that. I don't want to start sounding like somebody that runs for office that just keeps repeating himself over and over. But I mean, obviously I'm not getting it right here, so I wanted to repeat it at least once more. Mr.
No, I agree with you, Ty, when you were talking about risk management earlier, and what Dave and Gene have hit on is, I mean, there is no more representative government than local government. We see the people who vote for us, we go shopping at the store, walking on the sidewalk, walking in the courthouse. And so accountability of public officials is, I think, most felt at the local level. And so when we talk about risk management and best practice guides, the handbook, best practice guide isn't, sometimes I get the feeling that there's this idea that it's either, well, it's only a best practice guide, and what good is it? It's either you have to adhere to it or it means nothing. But a best practice guide is a good thing. It's a best practice guide. It's the safest way to govern a department without worry of unfair treatment or liability to the county. But because local government has countervailing interests and countervailing power points, statutory authority, Supreme Court decisions. And so these things have to be balanced, and they're balanced, I think, again, it's most felt at the local level. And so it's not that elected officials get to act with impunity. They get discretion, but their discretion has limits. There's state laws they have to abide by, federal laws they have to abide by. It's not that the handbook says you have to work 40 hours a week or you get comp time. It's not that elected official can say, well, that's just a best practice guide. I'm gonna let my office staff work 1 hour every 2 weeks and they're gonna get 100 hours of comp time. Like, that's just, there are laws in place that prevent abuses like that. And so I think with handbook and manuals, they are important, but I think it's also important to remember that it's good to follow, but also appropriate to deviate from, because there's authority to do so that's backed by law.
Excellent. I got one thing I'll add to that. I think that as department heads, and it's very important to remember, and that's why, you know, I mean, obviously the assessor's handbook is separate from ours. And I think, you know, he already had it quite similar, and he just had some specific things that were, whether he did it or not, considering as long as he'd been here, he had. But you know, it was pretty similar to ours. I think that anything that you might be deviating in any little fashion as a department head, you should always clear it with your HR team. You know, and start with Amy and then with Jack. And I've never really, in my mind, seen the auditor's office doing anything that wasn't for the good of the county. And I've never seen her really being personal. And I mean, and I think I can share that against all the departments. I mean, sometimes it might feel personal. I know Dwayne feels it's personal sometimes, but you know, she's got her parts to do. You guys have your parts to do. And I think that if we remember, as we're doing this, if you do something in the treasurer's office that's way off the norm of the handbook, this board and her office almost called immediately, or people get a hold of it right away. You may not always see that, but that's why the handbook is important to the whole lot of us, because it could affect you, and it is affecting us now. I mean, that's why we're sitting here now. Gene?
One thing I wanted to add, Colin,
You
is
have something, Colin?
you talk only about elected officials, and department heads are not elected officials. So I don't know if we need to have a special part in the policy manual that talks about, because the people aren't gonna re-elect the assessor or, you know, the conservation officer, the department head for, that's simply not how that works. So we're getting it mixed up. We're in the weeds again, that you talk about elected officials that we're trying to control your silo. That's not what this is about. This is about department heads that are governed by other boards. And that takes it off of the supervisors. That's not in our wheelhouse. And so we need to make sure that department heads, we know what the policy is for the department head, their employees, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
I would say this, just from, anybody that's got steady committees that are outside of here that are aboard, like Kyle's got the Yes Center, I got the Central Iowa Juvenile Detention Commission. And these, I mean, when I'm sitting in there, in them meetings, and listening to the deliberations on what they're wanting to see from Central Iowa Juvenile Detention, or even over at CDC, well, when they just redid their handbook, Jessica Garcia took the lead on that and did a great job redoing theirs. But I would tell you, those boards were laying outlines, like, you know, it was argued that Dwayne, all we had really, we could hire and fire him, or we could make his budget, and that's it. Well, actually, the board can provide guidance. This is what we'd like to see. And that, I believe that was and she could actually speak for herself since she's here now. I believe that was the intention of her motion that night, was this is the guidance. We'd like you to go back and evaluate that handbook and make sure that you were doing it right. Confer with Amy if you have any questions in your own mind, that you can get this correct. And if there's an errors and omissions, what's our insurance for that? I mean, if we had to use that, we'd have to use that. You know, I mean, I don't, like I said at the beginning of that meeting, I don't believe Dwayne had any malicious intent. We look at the things we just discussed here, that because we've been doing it so long, we think it's right, and it may or may not be. So I think that may be what happened here. So those are the things that probably need to happen when we're cleaning up our handbook. And that's, we also need to recognize, whether it's our board for 911 or our board for the assessor's office or any other board, public health or any of them, you know, they need to be up on the subject. They need to be briefed well by their body that they're representing. And, you know, I think that they need to have a better idea. I mean, I got the conference handbook now, or not handbook, but how it's supposed to actually be, you know, ran. And I would say that those are probably what we need to do. I'm trying to address Gene's thing about department heads that have their own boards that are between us and them particularly. So I think that's what probably had to happen that night. And I don't think it did, but I mean, we all did the best we could with what we knew. And anyway, anybody got anything else? And I don't want to keep saying the same thing here.
I mean, I'll just say that when you talk about other boards, I think that we need to look at what Iowa statute says, because Iowa statute may say something different
Yeah.
if you are the assessor, meaning you are that conference board, or if you're the board over public health, or if you're the board over the conservation. So that may dictate what exactly those boards can and cannot do, because we're seeing it right now with how the state changed that us from, you know, to an advisory roles on some boards that we weren't before. And so Iowa statute changed that. And so, you know, I guess I just would like to see, I think, some consistency. And I think that some department heads are elected officials. Some are not.
Correct.
And so if I was an department head, no matter if I was elected or not, I guess I would like to have a policy manual in place, just so that I'm not making things up as I go. That if there's something here that I can fall back on as a supervisor, as a leader in my department, and try to then get some consistency across the whole courthouse, that everybody's trying to follow the same thing. And so that to me is the goal. And what I mentioned Thursday night is, to me, it just boils down to the integrity of that leader, of that department head, so that if people, the public, didn't think that they were leading that office with integrity, that someone would step forward and run against them. I mean, to me, that's how local politics works.
Who runs
and how
for
it
the
should
assessor?
work.
Who runs for the
I
assessor?
said there are some that are elected and some are not, that report to other boards, and how those boards can interact with that department head sometimes is set by the state legislature. We need to follow what the state legislature says.
Correct. Great point. Thank you.
Great point, absolutely. But the conference board's policy manual and the county's manual mirror each other. Theirs just hasn't been updated. So, you know, we keep trying to find flaws with our policy manual, but our policy manual laid it out very clearly, black and white, what the policy is. And so if we're gonna pick and choose, even though we have a very nice policy manual that has worked, like Susie said, for all these years. Why all of a sudden do we need to deviate from it and make an exception when we have the best practices guideline? And that's all I'm gonna say about it.
I can offer just one quick thing, because I think it's a good illustration of exactly what we're talking about.
Perfect.
When you say we deviate, that's not completely accurate, because I'm not, what I mean by that is that sometimes there is no we. Sometimes it's just the department head is to make the call. And sometimes the we, as much as we would want the department head to make a different decision, as much as we would govern differently than a certain department head might want to govern and lead, that doesn't always mean that we get to make that call for them.
Thomas didn't have the last word, but if you have an appointed department head who gets to decide then if they've gone outside of that law of the land, best practice, that's not the will of the Crawford County citizens, the way their tax dollars are spent?
For an appointed official,
Or an appointed, not an elected, because I know how that
the board
happens.
that governs that director.
So then you're saying the next step would be if that board is unhappy with that decision, because the only thing that they get to do is hire and fire, that you're kind of saying, well, then you should fire them.
I'm not saying that.
Well,
I'm
that's
just
the
saying
only
that
thing we
there's-
can do.
That is an option.
And what Ty said earlier is absolutely right. I mean, it would not be wrong for a board to set out guidance
Yeah.
or even metrics that they would want to see, as long as it's understood. I'm not saying, I don't want to speak in blanket terms, because what Craig said earlier is absolutely right. Different statutes sometimes apply to different departments differently. But as long as those metrics and guidance are kind of back with this understanding that this is what we want to see, but we understand that we can't like bend your arm and force you to do it. But if you're asking us what we want, this is what we want.
And I'll just echo, you're right, and that's why just you guys can't come up and say, well, I have to have more money. I mean, if we say, no, that's all you're getting, that's all you're getting. I mean, and so you are exactly
I think
correct.
that's been the way it's been since
Yeah.
I've been doing this.
And so all I wanted, just on one more point, and then we're gonna move on, because though I don't want to beat this horse to death, but this was, as y'all can see, and hopefully you see, this was a very important conversation to have. And the final point that I'm gonna make on that is the same thing I tried to make earlier. Just remember that what you do, even though you have reign of your department, what you do in your department does affect the entire county. And it affects everybody's workforce. Even if you're over in public health or down in the assessor's office, which have boards between them, what you're doing still affects everyone, and it affects the efficiency and smooth operation of government. And that's the only thing I'm trying to say is to basically always double check yourselves as far as, if it's payroll issues, talk to the payroll people. Hey, what do you think about this? Am I crazy here, or is this gonna work? And what should I do here? I mean, it isn't, and I mean, thankfully, we don't have people retiring every day. That would mean our workforce was all baby boomers, and hopefully that's not the case. But I mean, if we don't do it every day, we probably don't remember all the things. And I will tell you, I'm very impressed with Amy. She does a great job for us. I've never seen her try to lead any of us wrong. And she's actually a great counsel for all of us, not just for Terry or not just for this board, but for all of us. And I'll even share with the mayors. I mean, if you have any questions, especially our smaller towns that, I mean, gosh darn, I don't think that Terry'd be upset if they'd call over things, just to help county government all the way across the board. I mean, obviously she's only got so many hours in a day, and we've got a pretty long list of things for her to do every day, but I mean, and I'm speaking out of turn saying that she has time for that, so don't hit me with a stick, please, Terry. But I mean, just to try to get things right, I think it's important. And that's serving our county in all aspects. So, I mean, does anybody got anything else on this? Do we feel like we beat this horse bad enough?
Beat it up.
Okay. I will move on to citizens input. Okay, sorry.
I reached out to Jerry about 37 and a half hour work week's been in place since August of 1974, right?
Oof, yeah.
That's before some of us were born.
Aw.
Hey.
That hurts a lot.
And she says, the only reason she knew because she started in May of that year, and that's when it started, and that was for the simple fact of shutting the courthouse at 4:30 and people stay on the clock till 5, so they get their work done.
That's exactly,
So exactly what we were told.
yeah, that's, I think,
So I think
They didn't
probably good
want
to keep that in mind.
Issues, so they could shut it down or so they get their work.
get the work done. Not
And-
Now, is there a
Get the work-
resolution that backs that? And there's some other language in there, I have no idea, but we got a place to look.
And maybe that's something that we need to discuss and put into the handbook properly or
We had more
whatever.
discussion today.
No, but
than
it
we
was a
had
good day. We haven't been given, we haven't given our local media much to write about, but I think today we changed
I know if you
that.
see me show Greg that, I didn't want to be, like I tried to hide any
Yeah.
information from the public meetings.
What month again, did you say?
August of 74.
Good job, Jerry Bo.
And you
Thanks,
said the
Cal. Appreciate
37 and a
you.
half hours?
I can read it. Back in August of 1974, they didn't want comp time issues. So they told us we could close at 4:30, but we were to work until 5.
There we go.
Or when we got our finish up work done for the day, whichever came first, so. The intent was to shut the doors of the courthouse at 4:30 so they get their work done. So if they got it done in 5 minutes or 30 minutes, I guess at that time they felt fair enough.
But they still wanted them, they were 8 hours.
40-hour work, 40 hours, comp time starting, stuff like that.
All right, everybody get that? That seems pretty equitable. I mean, we could make that an official resolution at some point if we need to, since we don't have one. But,
There might be one.
yeah, we'll let that to I've got more problems to help me figure that out. Is there any citizens input at this time?
I have a few. Eric, did you want to? Okay, so I've got, 3 things. First of all, taxes, we are at 48.9%, which is $16,801,000. We have a little over 17 million left to collect. I do have a bucket, and I'm not kidding you, at least this big of papers tied in there as tight as can be without receiving today's mail of taxes that have not been receipted yet. So we actually are ahead of this number. We just don't know what the exact is.
What was the number that has been paid?
48.6.
48.90%.
No, the dollar amount.
The dollar amount is 16,801,760.19.
So when you say that, is that 48.9% of the first half, or is that of the total
Of the
tax?
total year.
So we still have 17 million
So
to
we would
collect.
hope to be at least at 50%.
Right, so my point was, we're not
We're not.
like in a panic mode because we only got half of the first installment.
Why do those people wait till the last day to pay that?
There's some do.
Because they work for banks, I think they can get a lot of interest, I don't know.
I mean,
But Gene, you'd be an authority on that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
well, was I not there yesterday?
Yeah. One of our supervisors was in paying last minute yesterday.
You're welcome.
The
Banker, interestingly enough, huh?
The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this doesn't need to be discussed, it's just, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. We were talking about the conference board. I understand people beat this to death, that the assessor's office has their own conference board. However, I feel like it's important that everybody knows they're still working out of the county budget. And I don't think it's fair, and I'm gonna say that over and over, I don't think it's fair that their board can approve more of the salary than anybody else can approve. And my example is, it's my understanding the new deputy assessor is gonna make 85% of Dwayne's salary. That's more than Terry, Sarah, or myself make, and we manage an office and budgets. They have to have testing, I understand that, but we also have to keep up with Iowa laws and codes and everything else. And I just don't think that's fair.
May I ask a question about that?
Yes, ma'am.
So back to the department head and their boards. he gets to make that decision all by himself and the board would have no knowledge of that. I don't believe he's ever asked us our thoughts on that, you know, so that is a one-person decision that
I
his
just
board
think it
doesn't.
needs to be noted. I think more people need to know that.
There we go.
I mean, you've got 2 board of supervisors on that board, you've got mayors, you've got school board members. Do the mayors, do they know that? I mean, do the mayors and school board members know that 85% of that is more than elected officials who have to run every 4 years to keep their jobs?
They didn't even know we had a policy manual, so there's a lot of
Right.
things that, we've learned through this whole process, lots of things. They go to those meetings totally unprepared, no information, just for having a meeting, this is a budget, and nobody's ever given any, backstory to what's going on the agenda.
Like I said,
I'll tell you, I actually thought about that over the weekend. And, I thought, now how do you manage that without telling him how to run his office? And considering that we actually authorized him to start putting away money for the, audit or the, you know, where he's going out and assessing values, it's the, third-party audit deal. That actually puts a lot of extra money in his budget. And so going by the point that, you know, he's allowed to run his department however he wants with the money that he's got, he can literally use that money to pay them people that are that higher percentage, like you said. And I will tell you, my main thought of that was I regretted that we actually put that in his fund and just didn't say, we'll put this away in a general fund to give to you upon issuance and in a budget approval. I don't know how we could do that though, but because there's that other board in there. But to me, there's some way that we should have probably looked at doing that. You know, there's some of the monies that we saved for the tower system. I mean, that was actually, it comes down to the ethics of the individuals involved, okay? That's what we really got to evaluate here. I don't think there's anybody sitting in this room that's got any evil intent with the taxpayers' money. You know, so I think that we have to look at it that way. But I do think that we actually have to value our ethics, you know, and.
the last 2 years, I know that their percentages were very comparable to cost of living increases. And the other percentages that was approved by the board were 3% or less. And that's difficult to swallow. That's very difficult to swallow.
Sherry, I would offer that it is not our wheelhouse to change how the conference board operates. That needs to come from state. That needs to be talked to about with your state legislature, just like it was legislative priority last year of some of the legislators to change how the comp board works. To see change in the conference board, it needs to happen at a state level. We can't go in there and dictate how that operates or how the conference board operates, kind of like what you said, you know, there's state laws we have to follow. So to see change, I'd say, I'd be talking to the legislators.
But the board of supervisors says there isn't money in the budget to pay the other departments more, but there is miraculously this money to pay the assessors office more.
His budget is not controlled by us other than a third of the vote.
But it's still county taxpayer money.
It's still not,
It's a separate levy.
He has
It's a whole
his own
different levy.
No different
than-
authority.
no different than us that telling the hospital what to pay.
We have one vote.
You know, we actually sit here and work very hard to keep our budget in manageable. And so that our levies aren't actually, especially when you have higher evaluations, that our levies aren't taking more and more and more to where we bleed our taxpayers dry. However, we only have I mean, our hospital's its own taxing authority, the cities obviously have their own taxing authority, and the assessor has his own taxing authority.
School boards.
We don't, and the school boards, thank you, Dave. We don't get to tell them. And if you actually, you sit there and look at them tax statements. I mean, I would wager to say that we aren't the largest grabber of funds out there. I don't know for the smallest, are we?
Not the largest,
We're not the
the
largest
schools
school.
first.
I mean, we got a lot to spend. We got a lot of roads to maintain out there, and that's 49%. Actually, when you count all the stuff he does, our secondary roads is well over 50% of our budget. And, the sheriff, I think, comes in next, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's a lot lower than 50%, obviously. But, public health and actually, you know, you guys aren't your own taxing authority. authority. They talked about the EMA being their own taxing authority at some point. I actually like that they'd say that we,
EMS.
or EMS, yeah, EMS. Well, actually, they talked about EMA as part,
did they?
yeah, that was a discussion in the legislature this year. They've been lobbying for that, their state trade association. And, you know, if those things that happen, there's other places that we can't control the levies for other people. And obviously that affects our county tax asking. And, you know, to be fair, we actually have been sitting down and looking at some of the different numbers that are generated. And when you look at down there, they get to use our benefits packages. So that is what's not fair if yours is, but comparing it to other counties, we don't, without knowing everybody's benefit package, I mean, you gotta figure all that stuff in when we do salaries, so. That's all I'll say about that, for, as far as in the defense of the board, but as far as cost of living, we get that we'll go, you know, that it's been tough to face that this past couple of years. We've been doing the best we can, we think, you know, obviously you're not very happy with it, but I think I never beat that horse deaf enough to do, okay. So any other questions you got on that? I think we're listening.
You had 3 things. Go ahead.
47.5 hour, we're gonna have that on the agenda then for another time to, or are you saying that it is a 40-hour work week and that extra time is never going to work?
I would say since Jerry actually kind of put the letter of the intent or the intent of the rule that the supervisors at the time had, I mean, I'd be in favor of going along with that, because otherwise, if we have to redefine that, that's how I'd feel we need, I'm only one of 5, but that's how I'd feel we'd be going forward, so that Susie's department or Colin's department aren't doing it any different.
I think we need to look back in August of 1974 and see if there's a resolution or anything that's been passed that's currently on the books. We should find that out.
That's why
before
we
we
had-
make any changes from that meeting.
Yeah.
Sure there are, yeah.
Go back to more specific.
So that's what we'll do, is we'll check on that, and then if we have to, we could act on it as a board. So lobby your board members appropriately.
Status quo until we find out.
There we go.
Status quo until there's something different.
Yeah,
No action was taken.
no, yeah, it's no action taken today.
Thank you.
Is that all you had?
That's it.
Very good.
And there's a lot of here, any other?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know how the idea that people want the doors at 4:30 so we can get more work done between 4:30 and 5, and how that ever became, you go home at 4:30.
I don't know.
That seems
A stretch.
not like the intent of that. I don't know how that became 37.5 hours. The other question I asked Amy about this, about the 37.5 hour policy, and if I understand her answer, she said that you can collect comp time 1-to-1 from 37.5 to 40. Right? So you
Well,
could
it either
work,
has to be paid, because we can't not pay our employees for the time they work.
right. So you can collect 2.5 hours of comp time by working 40 hours. So you
I don't know
take-
how that works either. That was an oxymoron to me that you're
No.
using comp time when you're not.
I think
working
if you're
40
over
hours.
40, I mean, isn't that the
My
employment
understanding
law?
was over 40
That's the
5.5.
consistency, I think, that we talked about, that we want to see here. Consistency across, to make sure, is one department paying comp time after 37.5 and the other ones are not? I don't know. I certainly want to know.
Yeah,
Or
there's,
not.
Our timesheets do not reflect that. I mean, when we put it down on timesheets, if we have 38 hours, it pays you straight 40. It does not pay you for 37.5, about a half an hour of comp time.
but you got paid for 2 hours that weren't actually worked, so what do we call that?
So basically, the way I look at it, everybody that's governed, let's say, do you have your own handbook or whether you got your own board?
No, we just follow we have the conservation board, but we always just call it.
Used our county handbook?
Yeah.
That's what I assumed even the assessor did, but found out differently. We were wrong.
We
You assume?
But it
Yes,
was,
sir.
but
That's
it
a you and me.
appears
Yeah, I
that,
get it.
and it's exactly the same, so we're.
So that was the,
We have some of our own policies, but not necessarily related to
yeah.
a bunch of stuff that's in the handbook.
Yeah, but that's the point is, it doesn't appear that anybody that follows that handbook is doing the 40-hour, you know, where they're doing the 1-for-1 as Dan asked, or and they may not necessarily be staying here for the full 40 hours. I don't know. They'd have to tell you that themselves, but they aren't billing more for, at least at the, under the ones that govern under this handbook. Is that, would that be a fair statement while you're all sitting here? Anybody? Yeah,
I missed it, sorry.
that's all right. I see my
What was
sheet
it?
reading your.
I was on my phone.
Damn phones
I
anyway.
missed it, so I'm not.
There's no punishment for that, so.
I'll abstain from that.
Okay. All right. So, is that all you had? Or-
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Anything else?
Anybody can zoom?
Oh, Zoom, we got a lot of you out there. Oh yeah, we do have a lot up there. Does anybody out there have anything for citizens input? Karen, Bonnie, an iPhone, MJ, Joni or Cindy? None? Okay. I'd entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Dozark, second by Ms. Hayden. All in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Right, I did leave my left.
It's like a college class here today with this